Chapter 571. Song Song's biggest wish in this life was to turn white. She did not want to turn the black chess piece into a white one, but to turn herself white. Looking at the black chess piece, she thought of Master Qishan's words and smiled embarrassedly. She thought that it would be great and convenient if she could be as white as she wanted without using the cosmetics of Chenjinji Cosmetics Store. No wonder Master Qishan called it the convenient Dharma. Master Qishan was slightly stunned. He did not understand why she was laughing. Was there something wrong with the convenient Dharma that she found out? Ning Ke was the only one in the world who could guess the real reason for Song Song's laughter. Looking at Song Song's bashful smile, he could not help but laugh too. In the dark and cold cave, there was a relaxed smile, and then it gradually calmed down. Master Qishan's voice explaining Buddhism sounded from time to time, with Song Song's questioning voice occasionally. After some time, the lecture for the night came to an end. Master Qishan looked at Ning Ke and said, "Treating a disease is always a long process. The cave is damp and cold, not suitable for recuperation. Take her down the mountain to the temple to rest. If there is time before bed, let her think about what happened today." Ning Ke said, "It is inconvenient to go up and down the mountain. Why don't we rest here?" Master Qishan said, "I will go down the mountain at night. I will meet you in the temple tomorrow morning." Ning Ke was slightly shocked. Everyone knew that Master Qishan had been living in seclusion in Hua Mountain for decades and did not even attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. Why did he say that he was leaving his seclusion tonight? Master Qishan said, "This is probably the last time I will leave the hut. I have to go to the temple to feel at ease." After saying this, the master picked up the black chess piece from the ground in front of the futon and put it in Song Song's palm. Listening to the master's words, Ning Ke vaguely guessed something. He was shocked and grateful but did not know what to say. He solemnly bowed and then stood up to help Sang Sang walk out of the cave. When they reached the entrance, he said to Master Qishan, "You must come." Master Qishan sighed helplessly and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely come." Ning Ke was reluctant and said, "Sang Sang is not cured yet. Don't die first." Master Qishan was so angry that he laughed. He scolded jokingly, "How did you develop such a bad temper? Now I finally believe that the headmaster of the academy can't do anything to you even when he's angry at you." Ning Ke said with a smile, "The headmaster likes my honesty and dotes on me, so he doesn't punish me." He walked out of the cave. Ning Ke carried Sang Sang into the carriage. Sang Sang leaned against the quilt and clenched her small fist, for fear that she would lose the black chess piece. She looked at Ning Ke and said gloomily, "Master, is it bad?" After a moment of silence, Ning Ke nodded and said, "Don't think too much about it. It has nothing to do with you. Eminent monks of Buddhism have their own control of fate, not to mention a master who can predict the future." The night wind picked up and lifted a corner of the curtain. Ning Ke looked at the lonely Buddhist chariot beside the mountain path and frowned slightly. He did not know why the commandment chief monk of Shenkong Temple had been waiting outside the cave and why there was no one beside the Buddhist chariot. The sadhus of the White Tower Temple of Yueluan Kingdom had all been brought to the foot of the mountain by Kunimati. The monks of Lank Temple had already left. Monk Guanhai had sent the black horse carriage down the mountain and there was no one around the cave. The night wind blew through the autumn forest, making a rustling sound, but it did not disturb the birds. Vaguely, there seemed to be a clear and subtle ringing of a bell, but the ringing seemed to be unreal and disappeared in an instant. The Buddhist chariot outside the cave was still quiet. Suddenly, a hand reached out from the yellow curtain and lifted a gap. A monk wearing a dark brown robe walked out of the Buddhist chariot. The monk's eyebrows were straight like a ruler and his eyes were like gems. There were traces of hardship between his brows and there were wrinkles on his forehead. However, it was hard to tell his age. It was possible to say that he was in his 60s or 30s. This monk was the president of Commandment Yard of Shenkong Temple. The monk walked out of the Buddhist chariot and slowly walked into the cave. With the dim light, he looked at the tiger mahogany bracelet on the ground. He put his palms together and asked, "Uncle, what did you see?" "Bushu, why do you ask?" Master Qishan replied calmly. Master Bushu, president of Commandment Yard of Shenkong Temple, looked at Master Qishan quietly and said, "A monk does not lie. Uncle, you played 3 games of chess on Hua Mountain today, especially the chessboard left behind by Buddha. Naturally, it was not to make things difficult for the sick girl, but to see if it was really that person." Master Qishan smiled and said, "The great divine priest of revelation cannot see it. Back then, the great divine priest of light thought he saw it, but he was wrong. How can I see it?" "Did Wei Guangming really see it wrong?" Master Bushu said indifferently, What if he did not see it wrong? What if the son of Yama was really born in the general's mansion? What if Ning Kei is really the son of Yama? Master Chishan shook his head and said, if Ning Kei is the son of Yama, why would the headmaster accept him as his disciple? Master Buoshu shook his head and said, the headmaster is not an ordinary person and can do extraordinary things. It is not difficult to imagine that he would accept the son of Yama as his disciple. Master Chishan looked at him and said, if things are really as you think, then it is meaningless for the Shenkong Temple and the Jisho Abbey to do anything. Buoshu understood what he meant. If the headmaster knew that Ning Kei was the son of Yama and accepted him as his disciple, then even if the whole world wanted to kill Ning Kei, the headmaster would stand on Ning Kei's side. But the headmaster did not know. Because Buddha had said that there was no omniscient person in this world. Baoshu said, I want to know what you saw him do on the Buddha's chessboard. After a moment of silence, Master Chishan said, I saw a black horse carriage blocking the way. Buoshu asked again, where is the Lady of Light? She is waiting on the mountain. Master Chishan said. For some reason he did not tell Buoshu about what Sang Sang had experienced in the chessboard world. Buoshu sat on the futon and kept silent for a long time. The oil lamp on the cliff wall felt a little uneasy because of the night breeze. Buoshu suddenly said, this morning at the foot of the mountain, when Ning Kei was about to shoot, I felt a great sense of danger. The bell rang but did not ring. There seems to be something strange about him. Master Chishan said calmly, he has the aura of junior brother Lotus. Hearing Lotus' name, Buoshu's Diana heart was disturbed. He raised his eyebrows and said coldly, he is a disciple of the academy. How can he have the aura of Uncle Lotus? Although he came from the unknown place and was the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, he could not help but be shocked by the name of Lotus. After all, Lotus had studied Buddhism, Taoism and the Devil's Doctrine. He had a legendary life and had a high reputation and status in the Shenkong Temple's scripture hall. How could he look down on him? Master Chishan shook his head and said, or it has something to do with Mr. Ku? Buoshu gradually calmed down and said firmly, I am more and more convinced that Ning Kei is the son of Yama. Master Chishan shook his head and said, he is not, although there is no way to prove it. Buoshu said, the son of Yama is about to wake up. Then I am the only one who can prove it. Master Chishan's eyes suddenly became extremely sharp. Although he had been ill for many years and his real cultivation state was very low, his eyes still had the power of thunder. Why does the Shenkong Temple never connect the two worlds like the academy? Because the Shenkong Temple was originally used by the Buddhism sect to preserve the Buddha's nature in the Dharma ending age. What we want is to be isolated from the world. The unknown place should be unknown. Master Chishan looked at Buoshu and said in a low voice, you are the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, not a world wayfarer. You are not allowed to enter the human world without the Buddha's order. Why did you come to the Hua Mountain? Hurry up and leave this place. If it was any other monk in the world, even if it was the master of the Yueluan kingdom or the monk Huangyang from the Tang Empire, they would be very respectful to the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, not to mention reprimanding him like this. However, Master Chishan's identity was different. As the rumors said, he was the illegitimate son of the former chief preaching monk of the Shenkong Temple. He had been a monk in the temple since he was a child, so his seniority was extremely high. Besides, he knew what kind of place the Shenkong Temple was, so he did not need to care about the attitude of the Shenkong Temple. As expected, Buoshu did not get angry. He said calmly, I have my reasons. The one who came should be Qin Yen, not you. If you did not have a deep connection with the Buddha and the connection with the bell, how could you be the president of the commandment yard with your cultivation state of knowing destiny? In this case, you should be more cautious and not touch the bell. You should not be persuaded by Kuni Madi and come to the human world from the wilderness. Master Chishan looked at him seriously and said, you are a Buddhist cultivator, so you should understand the cause and effect. You should not be blinded by hatred. Dao Shi died in the hands of Ning Quebec. That is his cause and effect. Buoshu frowned slightly and then gradually calmed down. He said, I am the cause of Dao Shi and Dao Shi is my effect. Since Dao Shi's cause and effect ended with Ning Kei, then this is the cause and effect between me and him. I was born in the Pure Land and grew up in it. I walk with the bell and can deter all evil spirits in the world. If Ning Kei is the son of Yama, he will hear the bell and wake up. This is also the cause and effect between me and him. I came to the Hua Mountain to understand this cause and effect, and then settle this cause and effect. Master Chishan shook his head slowly and said, since you are so obsessed, Then I have to inform the chief preaching monk to remove you from your position in the temple and punish you to face the wall for 10 years. Wuxia said calmly, "All right, uncle, you know. I did come here on orders." Master Qishan was slightly shocked and frowned for a long time. After a long while he said tiredly, "Even so, Qinyan is still the wayfarer of the Buddhism sect. Everything in the world is based on his will. I will persuade my younger brother." Wuxia stood up, put his palms together and bowed, then left the cave. The cliff cave was quiet. Master Qishan, who was more than 100 years old, felt the strongest uneasiness in his long life today. It was even more than decades ago when the Devil's Doctrine massacred the front yard of the Lank Temple. The door creaked. Monk Guanhai had returned. "Master, Mr. 13 and the Lady of Light are resting in the front temple." Master Qishan looked at his disciple and suddenly asked, "The Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival is about to begin. They will still discuss the underworld invasion. What do you think of this?" Monk Guanhai looked at his master's haggard face and wanted him to rest early. He said, "No one knows where the underworld is. It is only a legend." Master Qishan smiled and said, "Idiot, if a legend becomes a reality, then it is no longer a legend." Monk Guanhai smiled honestly and said, "Then let's talk about it when it becomes a reality." Master Qishan asked again, "What do you know about the Shenkong Temple?" Monk Guanhai was slightly startled. He found that his master seemed to be a little strange today. He said, "You have never allowed me to ask about the Shenkong Temple and other unknown places. You have been the abbot of the Lank Temple for 20 years, or rather lived in seclusion for some years. One day you will go to the Shenkong Temple, so it is okay to know something in advance." Master Qishan said, "The origin of the Shenkong Temple is actually closely related to the legend of the underworld invasion. The underworld invasion is called the Everlasting Night. In Buddhism it is called the Dharma Ending Age. At that time, everything in the world will be destroyed." Buddha saw the terrible scene many years later. He thought hard for hundreds of years thinking about how to solve this problem, but he still could not think of a way. Buddha sensed the time of his parinirvana and found a pure land in the depths of the western wilderness. He made a great vow to build a temple and gave it an eternal barrier. Buddha collected Buddhism and Zen scriptures in it. He ordered the outstanding disciples of the younger generation to enter the temple to listen to the scriptures and cultivate. This is the Shenkong Temple. The reason is that after countless years of thinking, Buddha still could not think of a way to stop the Dharma Ending Age. This is originally the cause and effect of the world. There must be death when there is life, and even until the painful reincarnation of thousands of generations. Therefore, he hoped that the future generation of Buddhist disciples could use the protection of the Shenkong Temple to survive the torrent of destruction in the Dharma Ending Age. They could help the monks in the temple to endure the long, almost eternal night and wait for the arrival of the new world with perseverance and patience. After a long silence, Master Qishan sighed softly and said, "However, today's Buddhism sect seems to have forgotten the teachings of Buddha. They no longer think that way. Last year, Qinyan entered Chang'an City, and this time, Baoshu entered the human realm and came to the Hua Mountain. It all proves that they want to find the son of Yama and kill him. Master, I think the Vedantas of the Shenkong Temple did a good job." Although Monk Guanhai had been cultivating Buddhism for many years, he was still young. Thinking of the horrible scene of the underworld invasion, he said in a low voice, "All living beings have suffered so much. We should be merciful and help them. How can we only be kind to ourselves?" Master Qishan laughed and said, "Child, your way of thinking is really simple." Guanhai smiled embarrassedly. Suddenly, he thought of something and said in shock, "Master Baoshu came for the son of Yama? Is the son of Yama in the Hua Mountain?" Master Qishan smiled and patted his shoulder without saying anything. He thought that there were many ways to let the son of Yama leave this world, and killing him was not the only way. Since the headmaster said in the letter that this method was feasible, then it must be feasible. Whether it was for saving all living beings or for the cause and effect between him and the Shenkong Temple, he had to try. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 572. Ning Ke woke up before the sun rose. He opened his eyes and looked at the spiders weaving webs on the beams of the meditation room. He was silent for a long time. It was a good thing that Sang Sang might be cured. However, he felt that it was not that simple. The 3 games of chess on Hua Mountain, especially the illusion he and Sang Sang saw in the chessboard, made him wary of the Buddhist chariot. What alarmed him the most was the Buddhist chariot. He could not understand why the Shenkong Temple, an unknown place that rarely stepped into the mortal world, would suddenly send such a bigwig to Hua Mountain? The cultivators came to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival and did not leave after last night. Cuny Maddie and the others, as well as the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, were resting in the Lank Temple. Ning Ke decided to keep a distance from these people, especially the high monk of the Shenkong Temple, before Sang Sang was cured. His dangerous hunting life in Min Mountain had made him develop an instinctive habit. If you could not determine where the danger was in the forest, it was the best choice not to enter the forest. Faint footsteps came from outside the meditation room. Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang, who was sleeping soundly. He got up, put on his clothes and quietly walked out of the meditation room. At this time the morning light was gradually rising. The ancient temple looked exceptionally beautiful in the autumn fog. Master Qishan, who was wearing a thick cotton coat, stood by the stone railing outside the meditation room. He seemed to be a little afraid of the cold. He looked at the palaces and pagodas and said, "I haven't seen it for decades. Nothing has changed." The high monk of the Buddhism sect had lived in seclusion on Hua Mountain for half his life. He had not left the mountain for decades, especially after the bloody conspiracy of Lotus. At this moment, seeing the familiar and strange temple, he could not help but sigh. Ning Ke walked to the master and looked at the front hall that was faintly discernible in the autumn fog. He said, "Sang Sang spent at least decades in that chessboard yesterday. Although she did not say it, I know it was very painful." Master Qishan said, "She is not an ordinary person, so it will not be as painful as you think." Ning Ke asked, "Was that chessboard really left by Buddha? What did the world that Sang Sang and I saw on the chessboard yesterday mean?" Master Qishan said, "The chessboard is indeed a relic of the Buddha. As for the world in the chessboard, you can understand it as an illusion created by the Buddha's supreme power or a possible future." Hearing the word future, Ning Ke was silent for a long time and asked, "Is that the future of Sang Sang and me?" Master Qishan looked into the distance in the fog and said, "The future that can be seen is no longer the future." Ning Ke asked, "Is it possible to change the future?" Master Qishan looked into Ning Ke's eyes and said kindly, "Since it is a possible future, then there is a corresponding impossibility. Since it has never been confirmed, why can't it be changed?" Ning Ke seemed to understand something and said, "Master, it is said that you have the ability to predict the future, so you can guide people to turn misfortunes into blessings and solve their doubts. Does this ability come from that chessboard?" Master Qishan laughed and said, "Buddha may be able to see what will happen many years later, but how can a mortal like me have such an ability? And even if you have this ability like Buddha, when you see the future your gaze will fall on the future, and the future will be affected by your gaze. Then, how can the future that you haven't seen be exactly the same as the future that you have seen?" Ning Ke said, "It sounds a bit complicated." Master Qishan did not give any further explanation. He continued, "So if someone wants to predict the mysteries of heaven and see the future, such as Li Qingshan, the nation master of the Tang Empire, or me who used to be ignorant and fearless, or the great divine priest of revelation, they can only look at the chaotic world in the future from a distance and fear, because that is the only way that the illusory gazes of mortals like us will not affect the big chaotic world too much, but will be swallowed up by the chaotic world in the future." Master Qishan sighed and said, "But if we try to see the world in the future more carefully and clearly, not only will the future we see become more false, but we will also suffer more from the wrath of heaven. I heard that the great divine priest of revelation went to Chang'an last spring and took a look at Sang Sang in the old brush pen shop. He saw that she would return to the West Hill Divine Palace in 3 years. He was almost blinded by this." Ning Ke was slightly stunned. It was not until today that he knew that the great divine priest of revelation had tried to see Sang Sang's future in the old brush pen shop, and had paid such a heavy price. No wonder the great divine priest of revelation agreed to my 3-year promise. He suddenly thought of something and frowned. Although the future he saw might not be the real future, the great divine priest of revelation spent so much effort to confirm that Sang Sang would appear in the West Hill Divine Palace in 3 years. So he couldn't have been wrong about this. Master Qishan sighed and said, "Because of some reasons, I have some doubts about the future he saw. But as you said, I have to believe what he saw. So I am very confused. What kind of future could the great divine priest of revelation and Master Qishan not see through? Where would Sang Sang's future be and what would it be like?" Ning Ke patted the railing in front of him and looked at the heavy autumn fog in front of the temple. He said, "I still don't understand." Looking into the future was to pry into the mysteries of heaven. Not to mention him, even the great divine priest of revelation, Master Qishan, and the nation master Li Qingshan, who were famous for being able to foresee the future, did not dare to say that they could understand the truth. But it did not matter to Ning Ke whether he understood or not. Since the great divine priest of revelation had confirmed that Sang Sang would appear in the West Hill in 3 years, it meant that her illness could be cured. As long as Sang Sang was still alive, any future could be accepted. The morning bell in the autumn temple rang. After a simple breakfast, the monks in the Lank temple began their morning classes. Sang Sang, who was a little sleepy because of her illness, was also carried out of bed by Ning Ke and the class began. Sang Sang's classroom was the back hall in the depths of the Lank temple. It was too much to use such a majestic golden palace as a classroom for a single person. Other than the special status of Ning Ke and Sang Sang, the Lank temple gave them such treatment because Master Qishan, who taught Sang Sang Dharma, was the ancestor of this ancient temple. Master Qishan said casually, and even if he wanted to empty the entire Lank temple, not to mention the back hall, the monks in the Lank temple would not dare to have any objections. The monks in the back hall of the Lank temple had already received strict orders to not step into the hall. Other than a few monks of high seniority waiting outside the hall to do chores, there was no one inside or outside the hall. It was extremely quiet. Master Qishan's calm and wise voice could be heard from time to time in the hall. Sang Sang's voice was not heard. She was just listening carefully and learning. In the corridor outside the hall, Ning Ke looked at the gradually dispersing autumn fog and listened to the essence of Dharma behind him. He was calm. Master Qishan did not say that he could not listen with them, but he was a disciple of the academy after all. Last night in the cave, it could be said that it was an urgent matter. Since today was the official start of the lesson, it would be too inappropriate for him to listen to the teachings of the Buddhism sect that were not taught to outsiders. Moreover, because of second brother, he had no interest in Dharma. Time passed slowly, and the Dharma lesson in the hall temporarily came to an end. Sang Sang sat on the futon and tried to meditate with her eyes closed. At the same time, she recalled the contents of the morning class. Master Qishan walked out of the hall. It was almost noon, but the autumn clouds covered the sky. The sky was dark, and occasionally there would be a few drops of cold rain. The temperature outside the hall was a little low, and the master coughed a few times because of the chill. Ning Ke gave the master a cup of hot tea to warm his chest and abdomen. Master Qishan took a sip of the hot tea and put the teacup on the steps in front of him. He looked at Ning Ke with a smile and said, "Your attitude towards me is better than others. Your attitude today is better than last night." Ning Ke laughed and said, "I am a very realistic person and even a little snobbish. I hope you don't mind." The master shook his head with a smile and said, "Sometimes, honesty does not necessarily change people's impression of you. However, I believe that before you became a disciple of the headmaster, you were also realistic, but you were definitely more careful than you are now." Ning Ke said, "It was not until I entered the wilderness and found that the waste token of the second floor of the academy could scare so many people that I realized that I could live a life that was not so careful." Master Qishan nodded and said, "With the headmaster behind you, there is indeed no one in this world who is qualified to let you live like before." Ning Ke said, "Sometimes I also wonder if I am too arrogant." The master said, "Another way of saying arrogance is to be quick to repay kindness and hatred. Evaluation has nothing to do with means. Although you were tough at the foot of the mountain yesterday compared to Mr. Ku, you were as honest as a rabbit." Ning Ke said, "I don't want to be the second youngest uncle, so I still think that bullying the weak and fearing the strong is more interesting than fighting the world alone." Master Qishan looked at him and said pitifully, "I know that you had a hard childhood and even encountered the most difficult things in the world. That is why you have developed your current temperament. However, since you have entered the academy, you have the headmaster's teachings and the companionship of your peers. You should change." After a moment of silence, Ning Ke said, "The academy has changed me a lot. I like this change, so I am grateful to the academy. But it will be a long process." Master Qishan said kindly, "I may not be able to see what kind of person you will become in the end, but I look forward to it." Ning Ke was slightly moved and asked, "Master, what kind of person do you want me to be the most?" Master Qishan did not answer his question directly. His sad and sorrowful gaze passed through the rain and landed on the square in front of the Lank temple. Decades ago, junior brother Lotus massacred Lank. It was there that he ate a human for the first time. This is the first chapter. I can still write. Although it is hard, please don't wait. The next chapter will probably be written in the wee hours of the morning. I'm really tired. Please sleep first. I will continue to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 573. That day the smell of blood rushed into the sky. I was terrified on Tile Mountain. The bells in the 17 halls of the Lank Temple sounded an alarm and rang at the same time. The bell rang for 3 days and 3 nights. Master Chishan turned around and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, and just a few days ago the 17 bells in the Lank Temple rang again. The bell rang all the way to Tile Mountain. I then realized that the smell of blood had appeared again. Hearing this, Ning Kei's expression did not change at all, but his body in the Black Academy uniform tightened involuntarily. His mind was in a mess and then he became very alert. The Buddhist bells in the Lank Temple had rung because of Lotus practice of Tao Tai. So when the bells rang again a few days ago, they must have sensed what he had done to Long Qing in the autumn rain at the Red Lotus Temple. Master Chishan had obviously guessed the truth, but he did not expose it. He said kindly, I am now old and dying. Although I dare not say that I have seen through the difference between the orthodox and the devil, I have at least seen through it. However, there are still many people in this world who cannot see through it, such as the Shenkong Temple and Haoyan Taoism. In the eyes of Haoyan Taoism, even the Buddhism sect is outside the Taoism, let alone the devil's doctrine. Ning Kei, you have to understand that a man cannot defeat the heavens. No matter how strong Mr. Ku is, he cannot be stronger than the heavens. No matter how high the headmaster of the academy is, he cannot be higher than the heavens. So it is best not to come into contact with some things. If you have already come into contact with it, forget it. Ning Kei knew that the master was being kind and was trying to persuade him not to go deeper into the devil's path. No matter what situation he faced, he should not use the evil and bloody practice of Tao Tai. After the autumn rain, he often felt that there was still a strong and slightly sweet taste of blood in his mouth, as if Long Qing's flesh and blood were still hanging between his teeth. It was extremely disgusting. Because of the psychological trauma since childhood, he believed that he could control himself from using the practice of Tao Tai. However, he could not stop cultivating youngest uncle's great spirit. So would he eventually walk the same path as youngest uncle? Master Chishan said, Tell me about Lotus. Ning Kei lowered his head in silence. Even if the master had guessed the truth, he was still not ready to admit it because he did not want to take any risks. Master Chishan sighed and said, Decades ago, I was the one who brought junior brother Lotus into Buddhism. How could I not feel that he had passed on his mantle to you? I just want to know what happened to him after that. Perhaps it was the disappointment and regret in the master's voice that moved Ning Kei, or perhaps it was because he was very respectful of the relationship between senior and junior brothers. After a moment of hesitation, he began to tell the bizarre story in the depths of the wilderness. That side hall was filled with bones and dried corpses. Master Lotus was sitting in the middle of the pile of bones and corpses. The Lank Temple was quiet in the autumn rain. The incense burning in one of the halls stubbornly penetrated the heavy rain and floated to the corridor of the back hall, turning the oppressive and cold atmosphere into solemnity. After listening to Ning Kei's story, Master Chishan was silent for a long time. He smelled the faint fragrance and raised his skinny arm. His fingers trembled as they slid through the air, as if he wanted to grasp something. However, the fragrance was fragrant but formless. It was like a memory that he couldn't grasp. Even in such a hopeless situation, he was still able to make good plans and wanted to use you to escape. That was indeed junior brother Lotus's personality. Even though he died in the end, he was actually able to escape from the confinement of his body. He should be happy. A complicated smile appeared on the master's old face. Ning Kei thought of what he had experienced in the front gate of the devil's doctrine and the fragments of Lotus's consciousness in his sense of perception. He looked at Sang Sang, who was sitting on the futon in the depths of the hall, and said, Before Lotus died, he once said that if Taoism and devil's doctrine were connected, one could enter divinity. Now Sang Sang has cultivated both Taoism and Buddhism, and her body seems to be born with some kind of divinity. If she continues to cultivate like this, is it possible that she will repeat Lotus's mistake and become a madman? Master Chishan looked at the hall and said calmly, If she wants to turn the black chess piece white, she can do it. Thinking is what we call Buddhism. It has power in itself. If she doesn't want to become Lotus, she won't become Lotus. Then the master turned to look at him and asked, But you, what will you think? Ning Kei thought for a moment and said, I don't know, but it must be relatively simple. The simpler and purer it is, the more powerful it is, and sometimes the scarier it is. Master Chishan looked at him and said gently, Why didn't you come into the hall to listen to my preaching with Sang Sang? If you don't like my preaching, there are many Buddhist scriptures hidden in the Lank Temple. You can read them yourself. Buddhism can break the demons in your heart and get rid of all obstacles. It is good for you now. Master Lotus once said that the Buddhist scriptures are as vast as the sea. But if you look carefully at the bottom of the paper, you will find that all the Buddhist Dharma actually talks about one word: tolerance. And second brother once said that there are 3,000 Buddhist Dharma, but it is just a way to teach people to deceive themselves. Ning Ke said, tolerance and self-deception are the same thing. I am very good at tolerance, so I don't need to learn it. As for the method of self-deception, I am worried that if I lie to myself for too long, I will forget my original intention and think that it is all true. I will never wake up. Mr. Second is a courteous person. Naturally, he can't stand the Buddhism sect's disrespectful behavior. Master Chishan asked, but if life is a big dream, why wake up? Ning Ke said, even if we dream, we have to be happy. So even if life is really a big dream, we have to pretend that it is not a dream. Master Chishan asked again, then how do you know that the world in the Buddhist scriptures is a fake dream and not reality? After saying that, Ning Ke remembered that he had boasted to Chin Pippi in the back of the mountain of the academy that even though he was not a scholar, he could occasionally say something shocking. He was a little proud. However, when the master asked again, he found that he did not know how to answer. Only then did he confirm that the shocking words of an uneducated person were indeed something that happened occasionally. He was not qualified to understand the meaning of Zen. He said helplessly, Master, why do you want me to learn Buddhism and Zen? Sang Sang is sick and she can't get better if she doesn't learn Buddhism. This is her fate with Buddhism. I don't think I have any fate with Buddhism. Master Chishan laughed and said, how can the fate that Buddhism talks about be so simple? It seems that you really haven't read any Buddhist scriptures. I have to help you with this lesson on behalf of the headmaster. Ning Ke felt that something was wrong. Master, you seem to think highly of me, but I really don't think I'm special. He turned to look at Sang Sang in the hall and said, compared to her, sometimes I really feel that I'm as stupid as a pig. No matter how much I cultivate Buddhism, I can't make the Buddhism sect have another master. She is the most special one and you are also the special one. Master Chishan followed his gaze and looked at Sang Sang, who was already in meditation. He said with admiration, the Lady of Light is pure in body and mind. She can understand the divine skill with a single thought, understand Buddhism with another thought, and know destiny in 3 years. Before the master could finish his words, Ning Ke shook his head repeatedly. I know that there are people who are faster than me, so I don't think I'm special. Master Chishan said, but that kind of person is extremely rare. Ning Ke said, there are still people who are rare, so I'm not special. Master Chishan looked into his eyes and said in confusion, you seem to be very worried about being the special one. Ning Ke said, what do I mean by standing out in the forest? It's really annoying. I don't want to be a fat pig. Master Chishan laughed and said, that's just because you are in the academy? Ning Ke said with a smile, that's right. For example, my eldest brother comprehended the see-through in the morning and entered the knowing destiny state in the evening. Only people like him are qualified to say that they are special. Even if I smack the butt of a black horse, I can't catch up with him. Mr. First is a peerless person who comprehended the Tao in the morning and entered the Tao in the evening. Master Chishan said, but you are very different from ordinary cultivators in the world. Except for Master Yen Sei, who saw your talent in talisman Taoism, your other talents in cultivation are just ordinary. Ning Ke added, not only ordinary but also extremely bad. Master Chishan said, however, with such terrible talent, you entered the knowing destiny state in 3 years of cultivation. This proves that your ability has exceeded the scope of ordinary talents. I don't know how you cultivate, but I have heard of your performance at the 3 most critical moments in cultivation. When you entered talisman Taoism, you relied on a summer rain. When you entered the see-through, you relied on a fish cooked by the calligraphy addict. And a few days ago, you entered the knowing destiny state in battle without any warning. Master Chishan continued, cultivators pay attention to step by step and learn to master the rules of the chi of heaven and earth. As for the disciples of the Buddhism sect, they rely on years of painstaking cultivation to have a clear understanding. This is the so-called enlightenment. Ning Ke remembered the teachings of Master Huang Yang at the Wanyan Tower Temple. Master Chishan looked into his eyes and said seriously, your performance when you broke through the realm had nothing to do with those opportunities. It was more like the enlightenment that the Buddhism sect talked about. Therefore your comprehension is excellent. It is a pity that you don't learn Buddhism. Ning Ke could not help but feel that second brother's words were indeed reasonable. Whether it was Taoism or Buddhism, when they wanted to absorb new blood, they were really like the guys in the rat society who spat everywhere. I am really afraid that I will fall asleep reading the Buddhist scriptures. He begged for mercy. Master Qishan took out an extremely thin scripture from his sleeve and handed it to him. He said, I specially picked an interesting scripture and it is very short. You won't fall asleep reading it. After saying this, the master walked into the temple to see how much Sang Sang had learned today. Ning Ke opened the book in his hand and saw that it was just some simple illustrations of Buddhist stories. He could not help but feel a little embarrassed and angry. He shouted at the master's back, "This is for children. Can I have another one?" After lunch and a rest for a while, Sang Sang continued her Buddhist lessons. Ning Ke stood under the porch in front of the temple and teased the big black horse with a snow lotus. He felt bored and finally remembered the scripture. The illustrations in the scripture were simple and smooth, and the stories were also very interesting. They hid the enlightenment deeply and cleverly. The more he read, the more interested he became. He simply asked the monks in the temple to find a bamboo chair. He lay on the chair and casually flipped through the book. Occasionally he would take a sip of hot tea. When he did not want to read, he would look up at the fine autumn rain in front of the temple and relax his eyes. He felt very comfortable. Master Qishan walked out of the temple. Ning Ke stood up from the chair and handed him hot tea. He asked confusedly, "Master, why did you come out?" Master Qishan did not stand on ceremony. He took the hot tea and lay comfortably on the bamboo chair. He said, "Miss Sang Sang is meditating again. I have nothing to do inside, so I came out to talk to you." Ning Ke said in surprise, "Meditating again so soon? Don't tell me this stupid girl is sleeping?" Meditating was a term used by the Buddhism sect. It referred to the settling of thoughts before enlightenment and the state of being completely oblivious. In terms of Haotian Taoism cultivation, it was probably the state of emptiness before finding the opportunity. Sang Sang meditated before noon and again in the afternoon. This meant that Master Qishan taught her Buddhism Dharma and she could understand it without any effort. No one would believe it. Even though Ning Ke knew that she could produce Haotian divine light on her fingertips in the blink of an eye when she learned West Hill divine skills from Wei Guangming, he still could not believe it. So he suspected that she was asleep. Master Qishan said, "I can still tell the difference between sleeping and meditating." Ning Ke looked at his calm expression and asked curiously, "Master, you don't seem surprised." Master Qishan took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "I won't be surprised no matter how strange things happen to her." Ning Ke said, "Now I believe what you said last night." "What did I say?" "You said that Sang Sang can become Buddha. Everyone can become Buddha." "Master, I'm really not good at saying these things even though Zen does sound charming." "Then I'll make it clearer." Master Qishan lay in the chair and tightened his clothes. He said, "Buddha is a human, so why can't humans become Buddha?" Ning Ke said, "I used to think that Buddha was just a symbol like Haotian. Until my teacher mentioned it once and then I saw the chessboard yesterday, I realized that Buddha really existed." Master Qishan looked up at the sky and said, "Buddha also lived under the sky." Ning Ke looked at the gray sky and asked, "Since it's the world of Haotian, why does Buddha exist? Where did Buddha go in the end?" Master Qishan said, "Since there's a beginning, there's an end. If there's life, there's death. Since Buddha was a human, he passed away in the end. This is something that can be checked in history." Ning Ke thought about his strange experience and thought that death did not necessarily mean that there was life. Thinking of this, he looked at the lingering autumn rain and felt like spring rain. He couldn't help but feel a little tired. He thought that even if they were chatting, they should talk about something meaningful. He leaned against the railing and asked, "If Buddha was also a cultivator, what state did he reach in the end? As a disciple of Buddhism, how can I impugn the power of Buddha? Buddha is merciful. It's not a sin to talk about it." Ning Ke looked at the master and asked tentatively, "Buddha must have surpassed the 5 states, right?" The master smiled and said, "There's no such thing as the 5 states in Buddhism. I mean the approximate level." Of course. Ning Ke understood. He suddenly thought of a rumor. He looked at Master Qishan and asked seriously, "It said that before you got sick, you were regarded as the most promising person in the cultivation world?" There's one more chapter. More to come. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 574. Master Qishan smiled and said, "Hope and reality are 2 different things. Even if you break through, it's not something to be proud of. As you said before, it's hard to think that you're the special one." Ning Ke smiled and said, "You're too arrogant." Master Qishan was slightly stunned and said, "How so?" Ning Ke said, "The 5 states are the gap between heaven and man. If you can break through the 5 states, you'll become a legendary sage. There hasn't been a sage in the cultivation world for many years, but you said it's nothing. Isn't that arrogance? Master Qishan shook his head and said, although it's difficult to break through the 5 states, there are many people in the cultivation world who have the chance. And even if you break through the 5 states, how can you be called a sage? Ning Ke was puzzled and said, why haven't I heard of anyone who can break through the 5 states? Master Qishan looked at him and asked, what's Mr. Second's current state? Ning Ke thought for a while and said, second brother should be at the peak of knowing destiny state, but, you know his temper. Who knows if he'll break through the void if he's really angry. After saying this he couldn't help but laugh. Master Qishan didn't laugh because he didn't understand. Ning Ke awkwardly stopped laughing. Master Qishan said, since Mr. Second is already at the peak of knowing destiny state, then, after saying this, the master stretched out a finger and pointed to the top of the hall. Ning Ke suddenly realized that since second brother was already at the peak of knowing destiny state, eldest brother was naturally close to breaking through the 5 states, and might even have broken through. As for the teacher, this was a normal human discussion and had nothing to do with him. Well, I admit that some people can break through the 5 states. Liu Bai once fought with Master Yen Sei, and the East Sea was turbulent. Everyone said that he was most likely to break through the 5 states. In my opinion, he could have broken through the 5 states long ago, but he just didn't take that step. Master Qishan said, junior brother Lotus was amazing back then. He practiced both Taoism and Buddhism, and had the foundation of the devil's doctrine. If he wanted to, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through the 5 states, but he didn't want to. Ning Ke had heard this from Lotus himself at the front gate of the devil's doctrine. At that time, he only believed 60% of it because he felt that it sounded like a big shot bragging before he died. What? Ning Ke was puzzled and asked, why didn't these people choose to take the last step? Breaking through the 5 states means that the cultivator has left the secular world. Not only can he completely grasp the law of the aura of heaven and earth and understand the rules of the world, he can even create new rules. However, this is Hao Yin's world after all. The rules of the macro world cannot be challenged, so we still have to rely on the rules of the macro world. Master Qishan said, so for those few real powerhouses, the biggest difference between the peak of knowing destiny state and breaking through the 5 states is the understanding of the origin of the world. It doesn't increase their strength much. Ning Ke could not understand and said, it's always a good thing to improve. Who can resist such temptation? Master Qishan sighed. He glanced at the gray sky again and said, you are right. The temptation is indeed too great. But it is precisely because of the temptation that those people do not dare to take that step. Do you know what realms are above the 5 realms? Heaven opening, limitless. I've only heard of these 2. Ning Ke answered. This was what he heard from Liu Qingchen on the journey from the city of Wei to Chang'an. At that time he could not cultivate. Now he was a grand cultivator in knowing destiny state, but his understanding of the legendary realms above the 5 states was still at this level. He had once asked in the back of the mountain of the academy, but his senior brothers thought that his question was too boring and ignored it. Now it seemed that he could hear the answer from the master, so he could not help but feel a little excited. In the classics, there are many realms beyond the human world. The heaven opening you mentioned is the one that is recorded the most in the West Hill classics. The limitless is also a great divine power. In addition, there are also the infinity and extinction of Buddhism, the omen realm of the devil's doctrine, the quietness of Hao Yin Taoism. These realms are all above the 5 states. They have their own wonders, but there is no difference between them. Master Qishan paused for a long time at this point. In the legend, there is a more wonderful realm above all the realms. Even the oldest classics do not record it. It is only passed down by word of mouth on the 2nd floor of a temple, a monastery, and a sect. That is, the immortality of the devil's doctrine, the nirvana of Buddhism, the ascension of Hao Yin Taoism, the transcendence of the academy. The autumn rain pitter-pattered, and it gradually became cold in front of the hall. Master Qishan wrapped his cotton-padded coat tighter around his body. The devil's doctrine was founded less than 1,000 years ago, and I have never heard of anyone who cultivated to immortality. When the Buddha passed away, there was a vision in the sky. It should be the nirvana. The ascension of Hao Yin Taoism is relatively common, and they are the immortals in the folklore. Ning Ke vaguely understood something. Master Qishan said with emotion, in tens of thousands of years, there may be one person who can reach the end of the long road of cultivation. One person can reach the other shore and one person can be immortal. At that time they will return to the embrace of Hao Yin. Ning Ke looked at the stone steps wet by the rain and asked in a daze, Death or immortality? No one knows. Master Chishan was slightly perplexed and said, the Buddha will not tell us, and neither will the seniors of Haoyin Taoism who have ascended to immortality. So this is the biggest temptation and also the biggest fear. Ning Ke looked up at the master and asked, so neither Lu Bai nor Lien Xing dared to take that step? Master Chishan said, that should be the case. Breaking through the 5 states is still a long way from those supreme states. However, as the saying goes, one can only know the taste after tasting the marrow. After a cultivator understands the feeling of creating rules by himself, it is difficult to control the desire to continue to pursue upward. So unless one is sure that one's talent is just enough to cross that threshold, no one dares to take that step. The master slowly shook his head and said, however, those who can break through the 5 states must be great figures like Lu Bai or junior brother Lien Sheng. They are very confident in their talent. Ning Ke suddenly said, headmaster of the academy. Master Chishan said, don't ask me. Decades ago, the headmaster of the academy said that he was not a saint. If you want me to guess, I guess he cultivated the state of pureness. Ning Ke smiled and said, he is so lively. How is he quiet? Master Chishan said, it is enough to have peace in the heart. Ning Ke reached out to collect some rainwater outside the hall and rubbed it with his fingers. After a long time he asked, is there no one who cannot ascend to heaven? Master Chishan said, who can escape the cycle of heaven? Ning Ke slowly withdrew his hand and wiped it on his academy uniform. He said, teacher did not tell me this. Master Chishan said, because the headmaster of the academy is sure that you will definitely reach the peak of knowing destiny state in the future and see the gap between heaven and man. Then, you will naturally know the temptation and fear in the human world. Above the human world was the firmament. Ning Ke looked up at the firmament in the autumn rain and found that it was indeed desolate. He felt a little cold. The way of heaven was indeed ruthless. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 575. The autumn rain was chilly in the Buddhist temple. Ning Ke stood in the corridor outside the temple and looked up at the sky. He said, in the front gate of the Devil's Doctrine, Master Lotus once said that the Devil's Doctrine cultivates itself and is a world of its own. That is why the way of heaven does not tolerate it. You said that after cultivators break through the 5 states, they have the opportunity to create their own new rules. In fact, they have their own world, which is not different from the Devil's Doctrine in essence. Naturally, it is not tolerated by the way of heaven. Master Chishan stood up from the chair and walked to his side. He looked up at the sky and said calmly, the classics of Haoyin Taoism say that cultivation is a gift from Haoyin to human beings. However, if you look at the end, whether it is the obsession of Haoyin Taoism to live forever, the desire of the Buddhism sect to reach the nirvana realm, or the wild desire of the Devil's Doctrine to be immortal, they are all trying to break through Haoyin's restrictions on human beings. Ning Ke thought of his youngest uncle being punished by heaven and how many great figures in the history of human cultivation had quietly melted into the way of heaven. He felt a chill in his heart and said bitterly, Haoyin doesn't care about the underworld invasion, but always stares at the human world. It is really puzzling and annoying. Master Chishan smiled and said, your words and thoughts are already a great blasphemy to Haoyin. If you were not a disciple of the academy and if you did not say it in a Buddhist temple, the West Hill Divine Palace would not forgive you. Ning Ke suddenly thought of something and looked back at the master. He asked, I heard that Buddha has read the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane? Master Chishan nodded and said, Buddha created many of his thoughts, but they originated from his reading of the tomes of arcane. I heard that Buddha once wrote a Buddhist scripture to explain it, but it has been lost. Ning Ke learned this secret from the headmaster. He did not understand the Ming hand scroll, so he wanted to know what Buddha had seen from the tomes of arcane. He could not help but feel a little regretful. But Buddha must have mentioned the underworld invasion. In Buddhism, the underworld invasion is called the Dharma ending age. In some ancient scriptures, it is also called the Great Quietus. It is a terrible future. The world has Shenkong Temple and Lank Temple because of this. You mean the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival ceremony? Or the legendary Light of Buddha? In fact, the most important mission of the Lank Temple is to find the son of Yama. Ning Ke said, Master, you know that I am very sensitive to the word son of Yama. Besides, the Buddhism sect emphasizes on patience. Even if we find him, do we really need to suppress him with the light of Buddha? Grandmaster smiled and said, even if you endure, you still want to know what you are enduring, right? Buddha didn't go through the previous Dharma ending era. I think when he was undergoing nirvana, he must have been curious about what Yama would do. There's something that I've never understood. Ning Kei said, even if the legend becomes a reality and the night comes and the underworld invades the human world, why did Yama mention throwing his son into our world? It would be ridiculous to say that he was the vanguard. It would be even more ridiculous to say that he was training his son to inherit the throne in the future. Rumor has it that the underworld king was born at the beginning of time and will die at the end of time. He shines with the light and shadow of Haotian and possesses supreme power. He is unmovable and indestructible, so he is known as the immovable underworld king. Rumor has it that the underworld king lives outside of space and holds an infinite world in his hands. It is vast and boundless. That is why he is called Lord Guangming. However, what he wants to do the most is to turn the human world into the netherworld. Master Qishan said. Ning Kei suddenly said, the headmaster doesn't believe in the underworld invasion. Master Qishan's expression changed slightly. He asked, the headmaster said that to you? Ning Kei nodded and said, because the headmaster didn't find where the underworld is? Master Qishan smiled and said, then you can treat it as if I'm telling a story? Ning Kei said, thank you, master. The master smiled and continued his previous narration. In order to deal with the invasion of the underworld, Haotian created 69,999 fake worlds in the boundless space after the previous catastrophe, and then mixed the real world into them. No matter how powerful the underworld king was, he could not distinguish which world was the real one in the light of Haotian. Therefore, Yama paid the price of sleeping for 1,000 years to separate 70,000 auras and sprinkle them into the 70,000 worlds. These are the 70,000 children of Yama in the legend. The 70,000 children grew up in their own worlds and will wake up one day. Once they wake up, Yama can sense the rules of the world in which they live and confirm whether it is a real or fake world. At this point, Master Qishan was silent for a long time. He softly chanted the name of Buddha and suppressed his exhaustion. He continued, if the son of Yama in this world wakes up, Yama will know the specific location of the human world in the light of Haotian. Then he will use the son of Yama as a coordinate to descend to the human world. Ning Kei looked at the pot of tea that was no longer emitting steam and suddenly said, but the night has already come. Finding the son of Yama now is meaningless for our world. The night has not come yet. Everything we can feel now is a sign of a tribulation. Even if the underworld knows our location, it will be difficult for it to come over without the body of the son of Yama. So, the premise of saving the world is to kill the son of Yama? Other than killing, there are other ways. What ways? For example, let him cultivate Buddhism and then be purified by the light? Master, why do I feel that you are talking about me? Ning Kei, you are really an interesting child. What's interesting about it? What's interesting is that you can control your mind perfectly. I don't understand. If you want it, you can do it. If you don't want it, you can make yourself think of it. This is a very good thing. Master, I said that I am not good at Zen. Then what are you good at? Fighting? Ning Kei and Master Qishan's voices kept ringing in front of the quiet and slightly cold Buddhist hall. There was no one in the front or back of the hall, so they did not need to worry about being overheard. In the depths of the Buddhist hall, Sang Sang had woken up from her meditation. She was holding a scroll of Buddhist scripture and reading it carefully. The floor in front of her and behind her were all covered with Buddhist scriptures. Some of the scriptures were old and the edges of the pages were yellowed. Some of the scriptures were newly printed and still emitted the fragrance of ink. The clear light in the rain outside the hall shone through the window and onto her body. Her thin and small body was wrapped in a black cotton-padded jacket. Her slightly black hair fell on her shoulders. She was reading the scriptures carefully with a calm expression on her face. She did not hear the voices outside the hall at all. At dusk the next day, Ning Kei walked into the meditation room and lit up a stick of incense on a copper plate by the window. Sang Sang put down the scriptures and looked up at him with a happy smile, revealing her two white front teeth. Ning Kei asked, is it interesting? Sang Sang nodded and said, it is. Ning Kei said, the key is whether it is useful or not. Sang Sang thought for a while and said, it seems to be useful. Then she explained softly, it seems that I don't need to think about it. I will forget about it and it will not act up again. You don't need to think about forgetting it. You still have to think about how to make that cold aura disappear. Ning Kei sat down beside her and reached out to hold her wrist. He quietly felt for a moment and confirmed that the cold aura hidden deep in her body had indeed become much calmer than it had been a few days ago. He suddenly noticed that Sang Sang's expression was calm and her entire temperament seemed to have changed. He could not help but feel slightly surprised and wondered if studying Buddhism really had so many benefits. Sang Sang continued to read the scriptures. She was really diligent, probably because she was anxious to cure her illness so that Ning Ke would not worry about her. According to the common concept of Buddhism, this kind of diligent obsession was not necessarily good for studying Buddhism. It might even be a great obstacle. But the strange thing was that it seemed to have no effect on her at all. Ning Ke sat by the window and also began to read the scriptures in the twilight. Reading scriptures in an ancient temple was a very natural thing. He comforted himself in his heart and silently explained to second brother who insisted on slandering Buddhism. He started learning Buddhism yesterday. Although he did not have affinity with Buddhism like Sang Sang, his comprehension was indeed much better than ordinary people. He read the scriptures very quickly and would ask Master Qishan for help when he encountered any difficulties. There was a clap. Ning Ke suddenly closed the scripture in his hand. The sound woke Sang Sang up and she looked up at him. Ning Ke shook his head to indicate that it was okay. Sang Sang continued to read the scriptures. Ning Ke stared at the scripture in his hand in a daze. This scripture was very old, but the edges of the pages were not rolled up. It seemed that few people usually read it. The cover of the scripture was blank. There was no name on it. Ning Ke then remembered that when Master Qishan stuffed this scripture into his hand, his expression was very complicated. It was a little gratified, a little relieved, and also extremely serious. After a long time, he slowly opened the scripture in his hand again. The text in the scripture was not very profound and difficult to understand. It was a method to break the knowledge barrier described by an eminent monk of the previous generation. However, in the warm red twilight, the yellowed scripture faintly revealed other words. There was a layer in this scripture. Ning Ke carefully checked the binding of the Buddhist scripture and confirmed that the pages about the hindrance of knowledge should be a disguise made on the basis of the original thin scripture. With steady hands he carefully broke the layer of the scripture. More than 10 yellowed pages appeared in front of him. He didn't know what material these pages were made of, and he didn't know what ink the author used. Looking at the color and the feeling, it was probably thousands or even tens of thousands of years old. It was very old, but there was no damage to it. When he held it in his hand, there was no sign of it collapsing into ashes. The handwriting on the pages was not very good in Ning Ke's eyes. But he didn't even dare to blink when he looked at those words. On those pages, the first sentence was, "The wise are the sun and the moon." Ning Ke had seen this sentence on the Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane. So he knew that these pages were the notes made by Buddha after reading the Ming hand scroll. The next chapter will be very late, at least after 12 o'clock. Let me inform you in advance. If you want to sleep early, you can read it tomorrow morning. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 576. Since the sun and the moon correspond, there should be a moon. The sun and the moon rotate and the light blends, so the moon should be at night. But there are countless tribulations, and there is no moon in the eternal night. This goes against the law of nature. When the night comes, the moon appears. The night in this sentence does not refer to every ordinary night, but the everlasting night. In the everlasting night, the moon appears in the Dharma ending age and nature revives. Thus, the world has another way. In that case, it is better to wait for the long night. Why do things against the will of heaven? Is the sky also waiting for the arrival of the night? Or is it afraid of the arrival of the night? Is it afraid of the night itself, or the moon that comes with the night? Buddha's handwriting was very ordinary, no different from that of a teacher in a village school in the Gushin Commandery. The sentences in the notebook were also very casual and easy to understand. Ning Ke read it carefully. The twilight fell on his face, gilding his eyebrows with a layer of golden luster, just like the golden statues of the venerables in the temple. The Ming hand scroll of the tomes of arcane had always been in the academy, casually placed by eldest brother on his waist. He had seen it twice but always felt confused. Today, seeing the notebook left by Buddha, he finally believed something. In Buddha's view, the everlasting night this time was different from the countless everlasting nights in the human world. Then he remembered that the headmaster did not seem to believe in the underworld invasion, but he never denied the everlasting night would come. He even mentioned that a butcher and a drunkard had lived in the last everlasting night. The biggest difference between the everlasting night this time and the past was probably the character Ming, the character Yung in Ming. It was something that had never been seen in the world, and even the headmaster was confused about. But why was there a moon recorded on the Ming hand scroll? There used to be a moon in this world countless years ago, but it disappeared mysteriously? Then, just as the Buddha predicted, he would reappear during the everlasting night this time? The twilight faded and the night came. Ning Ke left the meditation room and came to a hut outside the pagoda forest in the backyard of the Lank temple. He quietly listened to the sound of the stream behind the hut and pushed the door open. Master Chishan was not surprised by his arrival. He smiled and said, "Did you find anything?" Ning Ke did not answer the question but asked, "Isn't it said that Buddha's notes have been lost?" Master Chishan said, "Notes that no one can understand are lost. I've been reading this notebook for nearly 100 years, but I still can't understand it. I hope you can." After a moment of silence, Ning Ke asked, "Master, why do you think I can understand it?" Master Chishan looked at him meaningfully and said, "Because the headmaster said in the letter that if there is one person in the world who can understand the Buddha's notes, that person should be you." Ning Ke had mixed feelings. He was a little shocked and a little confused. Whether it was the Buddha who had read the Ming hand scroll countless years ago or the great divine priest of light who had brought the tomes of arcane out of the Jisho Abbey 1,000 years ago, or the headmaster of the academy, they all found it hard to understand the Ming hand scroll. That was because no matter how intelligent a person was, when faced with something that had never appeared in their world and experience, they could not analyze it and could only guess. Ning Ke was the only exception. Ning Ke knew that the headmaster of the academy had written a letter to Master Chishan, and eldest brother had also written a letter. He had originally thought that it was to mention Song Song's illness and ask the master to take care of her, but he did not know that there was another meaning. Could it be that the headmaster had guessed his origin? Master Chishan led Ning Ke out of the cottage and into the forest. The mountain stream flowed slowly in the pine forest. After the continuous autumn rain, the night sky cleared up and the starlight fell on the pine stream, scattering countless fine silver dust. It was very beautiful. Looking at the night scene, Ning Ke subconsciously thought of two lines of poetry. The bright moon shone among the pines, and the clear spring flowed over the rocks. He turned to look at the master and asked, "Master, why did you pass on the Dharma to me?" Master Chishan looked at him and sighed, "Because you have killed too many people and are too evil. It is not a good thing for you and others, so I want to use the Dharma to dispel the evil in your heart." Ning Ke said bitterly, after leaving the city of Wei and returning to Chang'an, "I laughed and joked around. I thought that the smell of blood on my body had lessened and that no one would be able to see through my true cold-blooded self. I did not expect that I could not hide it from the master." Master Chishan looked at him and said with a little pity, "As I said on the mountain last night, I knew that the first half of your life was extremely hard, so I did not think that this was your responsibility. However, now that you have entered the human realm on behalf of the academy, I have to consider for the world. In order to prevent the world from being flooded by you in the future, don't blame me for forcing you to learn Buddhism." Ning Ke gradually calmed down and said, "No one likes killing except madmen. I'm not a madman, so I do not like it either. In the past, I killed because I would die if I did not kill. If I could still live without killing, that would be the best. I like it very much. How could I blame the master?" Ning Ke did not want Sang Sang to be distracted from the Buddhist scriptures, nor did he want her to worry about him, so he did not tell her about the Buddha's notes. He walked into the back hall of the Lank temple, lit a copper lamp and continued to read carefully. In the dozen pages of the Buddha's notes, apart from the prophecy of the future, it also recorded some of his understanding of the world and, more importantly, his way of understanding the world, such as his views on darkness and light. These words contained great wisdom, but it was a pity that when the Buddha wrote them on the paper, he did not deliberately write them, so they seemed a little short and casual, and it was difficult to form a system. Otherwise, Ning Ke would have gained great benefits. In addition, the notes also contained a few idle words that the Buddha occasionally left when he was in a mood. Through these idle words, Ning Ke realized that the Buddhism sect was not founded by the Buddha. Before the Gautama Buddha, there were even more ancient Buddhas who had passed through the long everlasting night. But because the Gautama Buddha comprehended the most fundamental ideology of the present Buddhist sect under the tree, the Gautama Buddha was honored as the earliest Buddha by the disciples of the Buddhist sect today. Ning Ke remembered that the headmaster had once described the method that the Buddha had comprehended as "shut up," and could not help but laugh. Both the headmaster and second brother had mocked the Buddhism sect, but this only represented the temperament of the academy itself, and did not mean that the Buddhism sect could be ignored. Being able to read the Buddha's notes was a great lucky chance that not everyone could have. Ning Ke sighed with relief, but he was still a little unwilling. He did not know if the memory of reading in the old library was too deep, but looking at the ordinary handwriting left by the Buddha in the notes, he subconsciously used the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong. At that time he could not cultivate, but he wanted to see the words of the predecessors of the academy, so he forced the method of breaking the characters. He was in a coma and vomited blood all the way. It finally proved that although it was useful, it was really not very useful. After he could cultivate, especially after he entered the see-through realm, the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong became even more useless for cultivation. It had disappeared from his life for a long time. At this time, facing the Buddha's notes, he actually did not think that it would have any effect when he used the 8 strokes calligraphy of Yong. It was just a futile attempt in front of a mountain of treasures, and he was unwilling to return empty-handed. However, in the next moment, Ning Ke found it hard to understand that his attempt seemed to have worked. With a soft hum, his sense of perception suddenly opened. The ink characters on the Buddha's notebook gradually floated in front of his eyes and then gradually dispersed, turning into densely packed individual strokes. Some of the strokes hung straight down like a Buddhist pestle, some were thicker like a Buddhist bell, some were like a copper bowl in the hands of an ascetic monk, and some were like a Buddhist bell in a mountain pavilion. These strokes floated away from the pages of the notes into his eyes, and then into his sense of perception. They kept flying in his spiritual world, reconstructing an incomprehensible picture. Ning Ke put down the Buddha's notes and looked to the side of the hall. The Lank temple worshipped the stone statues of the Buddha. There were a dozen of them in the front of the temple, and 4 in the deepest back hall. He was looking at these 4 statues. There were also stone statues of the Buddha in the Wanyan Tower Temple in Chang'an and the White Tower Temple in Yueluan Kingdom. It was said that people with great wisdom could understand the true meaning of the emblematic gestures of Buddhism from these statues. A few days ago, the powerhouse from the Sword Garret of South Jin Kingdom, Mr. Cheng, who had reached the knowing destiny state, had lamented in front of the stone statues of the Buddha in the side hall of the front temple. He could feel the wisdom within, but he could not understand it. The stone statue on the rightmost side of the back hall had a ferocious face, and its eyes were wide open. The hands of the stone statue were exposed, and they seemed to be touching but not touching, forming a very complicated hand gesture. A majestic and stern aura gushed out from the stone statue's fingers. Ning Ke looked at the stone statue of the Buddha quietly for a long time. Then he raised his hands and began to imitate the hand gesture according to the hands of the statue. The hands of the statue of the Buddha maintained a fixed posture. Ning Ke was obviously imitating, but his hands did not stop moving in front of him. Instead, they moved slowly and gestured in front of him. At this moment, there was a fragment of consciousness deep in his sense of perception that seemed to sense something. It lit up slightly and released a very thin psyche. Then it disappeared and calmed down. Ning Ke understood the true meaning of the posture of the hands of the statue of the Buddha, and his hands gradually stopped. He placed one palm vertically in front of him, and the other horizontally behind him. His right index finger was slightly bent in the air, and his left index finger fell on the back of his right palm. It looked very strange and did not have any beauty. This posture was not the same as that of the stone statue of the Buddha. There was not even the slightest similarity. However, at the moment when his left index finger fell on the back of his palm, a chilling aura that was almost identical to that of the stone statue appeared. The dewdrop condensed from the Great Spirit in Ning Ke's abdomen began to spin slowly, releasing streams of pure Great Spirit that were transported to all parts of his body through the seemingly invisible channels. He cultivated the Great Spirit day and night diligently, so he was no stranger to the operation of the Great Spirit. However, he found that the operation of the Great Spirit at this time seemed to be very different from before. The biggest difference was that the Great Spirit in his body was no longer as unruly as before. Instead, it became much more peaceful and gentle. Even the slightest wisp of qi could be completely controlled by him as long as he moved his psyche. After the Great Spirit ran 3 times in his body, Ning Ke only felt comfortable all over. Many senses were so beautiful that he could not help but let out a satisfied sigh, which floated in the quiet night hall. Then he looked at the next stone statue of the Buddha. There are only 2 chapters today. I'll go to bed early to recover my energy. Tomorrow, the last day of the month, I'll try to break out. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 577. Today's monthly ticket, tomorrow's monthly ticket, November's monthly ticket, all the monthly tickets you have this year, please give them to me. Keep muttering. The stone statues in the temple were originally painted with gold lacquer. After many years, the gold lacquer peeled off, revealing the stone inside. Under the dim light, they looked merciful yet terrifying. Ning Ke looked at one statue of the Venerable and then another. He was so focused that he forgot himself and did not feel thirsty or sleepy at all. His hands kept moving in front of him. He did not stop until he finished looking at all 4 statues of the Venerable. He picked up the futon and sat down in front of the temple sill. Facing the night sky, he closed his eyes and began to ponder quietly. Unknowingly, a night had passed. The autumn rain fell on the old temple again, rushing out the thin mist and making the eaves of the temple shine clearly in the morning light. The clear and long bell of the main hall of the front temple spread to the distant back hall. Ning Ke opened his eyes. His eyes were crystal clear and then gradually returned to normal. Looking at the gradually falling autumn rain outside the sill, he raised his right arm and casually stretched it forward. The autumn wind blew in front of the temple and the rain fell restlessly. Suddenly, a huge blank space appeared in the heavy rain. There was not a single drop of rain in that space, which looked extremely dry. If one looked carefully, the blank space in the autumn rain was exactly in the shape of a palm. After a long time, the aura that lingered in front of the temple gradually faded. The slanting autumn rain that did not dare to fall drifted into the range of the invisible palm print, and everything returned to normal. Ning Ke did not understand what he had learned and gained during the night until now. Looking at the heavy autumn rain outside the temple, he could not help but feel a little agitated. Fearlessness, dhyana, exorcism, mindfulness. I did not expect that you could understand the 4 emblematic gestures of Buddhism in one night. Master Chishan's weak but surprised voice came from outside the temple. Ning Ke turned around and bowed to the Grand Master, making a deep bow. He had many things to thank him for. Last night, he had been meditating in the temple, and the Master had guarded him outside the temple for the whole night. Such loving care deserved his sincere bow. Master Chishan looked at Ning Ke and sighed. No matter how deep one's affinity with Buddhism was, or how high one's comprehension ability was, it was impossible for one to comprehend the profound meaning of the 4 great Buddhist hand incantations in one night. This was because the Buddhist hand incantations were not Buddhist Dharma, and Buddhist cultivators could not bypass them and open up their perception. However, the perceptive barrier did not seem to have any effect on Ning Quebec. Master Chishan could feel the aura of junior brother Lotus in Ning Ke's body. It was much fainter than yesterday, and he understood the real reason why he could surpass the knowledge barrier. Because Lotus had already overcome these barriers in the past. Master Chishan looked at Ning Ke and thought sadly, "Younger brother, you are constantly leaving this world. Is this how you continue to exist in this world?" Envoys from various countries had already arrived at the Hua Mountain. They were discussing the desolate man's invasion in the front temple and had meetings all day long. In the middle temple, cultivators were discussing what they had seen and heard in the Hua Mountain a few days ago. They recalled the scene of that day with awe and excitement. At the same time, they guessed if any bigwigs would come to the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival in a few days. Ning Ke and Sang Sang naturally did not care about these things, even though they were invited to attend the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. They read Buddhist scriptures and looked at Buddha statues in the back temple of the Lank Temple. They followed Master Chishan to visit the Buddhist Dharma in the halls. Their lives were unusually peaceful, and even their states of mind had become much more tranquil. He still asked Master Chishan about the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. After all, this was the grandest festival in the human world. It had a strange origin, and there was a legend about the light of Buddha suppressing the underworld, so he was very curious. How could the Buddhism sect have the ability to suppress the underworld? In the beginning they only prayed that the night would not come. Later, it gradually evolved into a gathering of the strongest cultivators in the cultivation world to discuss how to deal with it. However, after countless years the night never came. The legend of the underworld invasion became a real legend. Who would still care about it? Master Chishan smiled and said, "The Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival is held every year, but the time of the cultivators' gathering is not fixed. Even though it has lost its original purpose, the Buddhism sect does not want to lose the opportunity to show itself. The Yueluan Kingdom is known as the 72 Temples of Misty Rain, and only the famous ones. If we count the ordinary temples, I am afraid there are more than 1,000 of them. Moreover, it is adjacent to the Western Wilderness, much closer to the Shenkong Temple. Why didn't the Buddhism sect hold the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival in the Yueluan Kingdom, such as the White Tower Temple?" Ning Ke asked in confusion. Master Chishan asked, "Do you know where the first big temple that the Shenkong Temple built in the world was?" Ning Ke shook his head. Master Chishan pointed at the eaves under the railings and said, "It is here." Ning Ke was slightly surprised. What was the reason? Master Qishan knew what he was thinking and explained, because it is the closest to the Xiankong Temple. Ning Ke thought that the Xiankong Temple was far away in the depths of the western wilderness, while the Lank Temple was located in the southeast. The coastline could be seen from the top of the Tile Mountain. The distance between the two places was obviously the furthest in the world. Why did the master say that it was the closest? Master Qishan smiled and said, "It is said that when the Buddha traveled to the southeast, when his disciple was playing chess in the mountains, he suddenly sensed it and pointed to the foot of the mountain from the peak. That was the location of the Lank Temple. The reason for this is that the Lank Temple that we are in now has some kind of connection with the Xiankong Temple." Ning Ke still did not understand the deep meaning hidden in these 6 words. Master Qishan turned around and pointed to the back of the hall. He said, "It is said that many years ago, the Buddha comprehended the supreme dharma of unhindered passage through space. He built a simple stone tower there, allowing monks to directly reach the western Pure Land." Ning Ke said in shock, "I have only heard that the Tang military and the West Hill Divine Palace have some special and powerful talisman arrays that can transmit simple information. I have never heard of any array that can transmit people far away. Isn't this the legendary limitless state?" Master Qishan said, "There is no Chanchi in the Buddhism sect. Naturally, there is no limitless state. However, with the Buddha's omnipotent ability, it is not too hard to imagine that he could create such an item." Ning Ke thought of the adventure that he and Sang Sang had on the Buddha's chessboard and the Buddha's notes that had not left him these days. He believed it more and asked nervously, "What about the array now?" Master Qishan smiled bitterly and said, "No matter how romantic he was, he would always be blown away by the wind and rain. No matter how powerful Buddha was, after thousands of years, the mana he left behind would have long disappeared. The simple stone pagoda in the legend would have long turned into ashes. The monks in the temple later built a Buddhist hall on the rumored location of the stone pagoda, which is the back hall. Not to mention traces of the past, not even a trace of Buddha can be found." Ning Ke could not help but feel a little emotional when he heard this. In the face of time, only death could be eternal. The entire Tile Mountain belonged to the Lank Temple. Although the Buddhism sect did not expand the temple to include the mountain, the area of the temple was extremely wide. It would take at least half an hour to walk from the square in front of the temple to the Buddha hall in the back of the temple. One could imagine the size of the temple. The ancient temple was divided into 3 parts: the front, the middle, and the back. In the front temple, besides the majestic main gate and the square in front of the temple, there were 2 extremely imposing Buddha halls. The middle temple was relatively small, with nearly 10 Buddha halls scattered around. The back temple was the smallest and the most secluded, with only 1 back hall. The autumn rain continued, and the monks in the temple were busy preparing for the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival. The diplomatic corps of various countries were still having heated or intense discussions, and the cultivators were still competing with each other. The front temple was solemn and tense, while the middle temple was lively with sword shadows. Only the back temple was still quiet. Ning Ke would occasionally take Sang Sang for a walk in the halls of the middle temple when he had free time to study Buddhism. They walked in the drizzling autumn rain with big black umbrellas and listened to the voices in the halls. They smiled and did not speak. No one noticed their existence as long as they did not want to be noticed. They also went to the front temple and stood in the pavilion under the autumn trees, watching the dance of the House of Red Sleeves in the courtyard outside the temple. Those young and beautiful girls were sweating and their clothes were swaying, which was very pleasing to the eye. Looking at Xiao Qiao on the stage from afar, who was directing and reprimanding with a clear voice, she looked a bit like Mistress Jian. Sang Sang could not help but laugh. Although the dance of the House of Red Sleeves was not as gorgeous as Ni Chang's, it was more auspicious like the goddess of the Buddhism sect. It should be very successful. Ning Ke and Sang Sang just stood in the pavilion and watched from afar. They did not intend to meet the dance group of the House of Red Sleeves. He did not go to the Tang Empire's diplomatic corps either. The Western General Xian Zhilang had expressed his request for a meeting through the monks in the temple, but he really did not want to be disturbed by worldly affairs. When Master Qishan was preaching the Buddhist scriptures, he once said that Buddhism was a way of looking at the world and a way of learning. But most importantly, it was an attitude towards life. His attitude towards life was teased by the headmaster of the academy for keeping his mouth shut, ridiculed by Lotus for pretending to be a turtle, and ridiculed by Second Brother for pretending to be dead. However, the unique calmness and self-control of the Buddhism sect had its own charm. Now that Sang Sang was recovering from her illness and Ning Ke had learned Buddhism, he was naturally in a peaceful state of mind. In retrospect, the few days in the Lank Temple in the autumn of the 16th year of the Tianqi era were the most peaceful and joyful period of his life. However, it was then that he realized that this peaceful and joyful period was just a sad comfort. On the first day of the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, tourists from all over the world came one after another. The small town in front of the Tile Mountain was extremely lively, and the square in front of the Lank Temple was even more crowded. No one knew how many pairs of shoes had been trampled on. If it were not for the monks and the soldiers sent by the local government to maintain order, there would be no way to perform in the square and the ceremony would not have been able to proceed. All the countries in the Central Plains had sent their audience groups and performing guests. The parade of floats attracted waves of cheers. The dance group of the House of Red Sleeves from Chang and City easily received the most applause and cheers. After that, there was a ceremony led by the abbot of the Lank Temple to pray for the world. Then there was a divine priest from the divine hall who presided over the worship to heaven. Countless believers knelt on the ground, and the scene was extremely solemn. Ning Ke and Sang Sang did not join in the fun. They stood on the railing of the back temple and looked down at the bustling scene at the foot of the mountain. Looking at this scene, he could not help but laugh and said, "Can they mix and match like this?" After the ceremony, the girls of the House of Red Sleeves began to dance. The applause and cheers in front of the temple suddenly broke through the sky. A few senior monks in the Lank Temple looked at the beautiful and solemn girls dancing on the stage. They did not know if it was because they thought of the story from many years ago, but their eyes became wet. Ning Ke looked at the front of the temple and said with emotion, "After decades, the old temple can finally see the dance of the flower-scattering goddess again. Fortunately, Lian Sheng is dead. I think the Lank Temple will be able to get through this peacefully." If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for it and vote for it. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 578. For ordinary people and tourists, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was a grand festival and the theme of this autumn. But for the real bigwigs, the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival was just a reason and an excuse for them to meet. They just needed to use this excuse to meet and discuss some real issues. Before the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival, the diplomatic corps of various countries had reached a final plan. They only needed to submit it to the imperial court of each country for review, and then the emperor or king stamped it with the royal seal. In this plan, all the countries in the Central Plains agreed to continue to send troops to the wilderness next year, and they would greatly increase the number of troops and strengthen the logistics. The Tang Empire was also requested to show its true strength, instead of remaining silent as it did the year before. The reason for this was that the situation in the wilderness had become more and more chaotic. After the desolate man gained a firm foothold, they only needed a year of recuperation before they regained their strength. The left king's palace of the barbarians, who had been fooled by the countries of the Central Plains in the last war, finally came to their senses after paying a heavy price in blood. They began to wander between the Central Plains and the desolate man and tried to take revenge. The desolate man had left the world for too long, and the barbarians were the masters of the wilderness for the past 1,000 years. Although the left king's palace had lost a lot of power, they were very familiar with the wilderness. If they really got entangled with the Central Plains countries, they could hide in the vast Min Mountain even if they were defeated. The Central Plains countries had no better way to deal with them. What the Central Plains countries were most wary of was the cavalry of the left king's palace. Under such a heavy loss, they might really give up the dignity of the left king's palace and turn to the Golden Palace. The Golden Palace had been very quiet for decades. Many people in the Central Plains had forgotten the existence of this ferocious beast. But the officials and nobles knew very well that the South Jin Kingdom was said to be the second most powerful country in the world. In fact, the second most powerful country in the world was still the Golden Palace. The Golden Palace had the best cavalry, the most horses, and the most high priests. If it were not for the Min Mountain, the several valiant Chanyu of the Golden Palace would have already unified the entire wilderness. And if it were not for the Tang Empire's hundreds of years of unyielding resistance in the south, the cavalry of the Golden Palace would have swept the Central Plains much earlier, or even to the foot of the Peach Mountain of West Hill. In the face of the envoys' anger and pleading, the Tang Empire's envoys finally agreed to sign the plan. On the one hand, it was because of the pressure from the West Hill Divine Palace, but more importantly, it was for the Tang Empire's own strategic considerations. The Tianqi Mountains and the Min Mountain were actually the same mountain range. They stretched for thousands of miles and ran through the north of the mainland, cutting the wilderness into two halves. However, there was a very narrow valley in the middle that divided the wilderness into the north and the south. The people of the Central Plains used to call it the Southern Min Mountain and the Northern Min Mountain, while the grassland barbarians used to call the Northern Min Mountain as Tianchi Mountain. If the left king's palace wanted to contact the Golden Tribe royal court and even fight together, their cavalry had to pass through the valley. To the west of the valley was the city that the Tang Empire had spent countless manpower and resources to build. This was the farthest and most important city from the Great Tang. Chang'an would never allow that city to be threatened. The envoys from the front temple had already finished their mission. They either went to the town to have fun with the people or left early to rush back to their respective capitals to report on the outcome of the discussion. The cultivators from various sects were still in the middle temple. If it was any other day, the heads of these cultivation sects would definitely leave with the bigwigs from various countries. Because of the West Hill Divine Palace, they had to listen to the orders of the royal families. However, the situation was different this year. They had to wait for the bigwigs in the back temple to speak. The bigwigs in the back temple were the real bigwigs. Whether it was Mr. Cheng from the Sword Garret or Aunt Cuny Maddie and the flower addict Lu Chinjia, they could all ignore the affairs of their respective countries. Moreover, this year the president of the Commandment Yard of the Shenkong Temple and the representatives from the Academy and the West Hill Divine Palace were there. The representative from the Academy was naturally Ning Quebec Sang Sang was very qualified to be the representative of the West Hill Divine Palace. However, she only had the title of the Divine Hall and did not have any specific duties. Most importantly, the Divine Hall knew very well that the Lady of Light would definitely not care about these affairs, so they sent a divine priest to help. The divine priest was Ning Kei's acquaintance. He was the priest of the Divine Hall of Revelation, Cheng Lishue. Ning Kei looked at Cheng Lishue and said helplessly, "How could the Divine Hall think of helping? If Sang Sang really said something, would you really listen to her? Who would believe that?" Cheng Lishue smiled and said, "If the Lady of Light is really willing to express her opinion, of course I will respect her opinion. And I believe that no one in the Divine Hall will object to her opinion." Don't say such repetitive words to express goodwill in the future. It's meaningless. Ning Kei looked at him and said, "You should have heard about the rumor about my origin." Cheng Lishue looked calm and said, "I have heard about it." Ning Kei asked, "Do you believe it?" Cheng Lishue smiled and said, "I don't know." Ning Kei asked, "Does the great divine priest of Revelation know about it?" Cheng Lishue shook his head and said, "The great divine priest said that he doesn't know either." Ning Kei said, "Then if someone in Haotian Taoism says that I am the son of Yama, don't blame me for being rude." Cheng Lishue said helplessly, "If you don't mention it yourself, who would dare to mention that rumor in front of you?" Ning Kei smiled and said, "Spreading a rumor may bring a moment of pleasure, but the whole family will die. I'm just reminding you." Cheng Lishue really didn't want to continue this meaningless conversation with him. He took out a letter from his sleeve and handed it to Ning Quebec. He said, "This is a letter from the great divine priest of judgment. He wants me to hand it to you personally." Ning Kei was slightly stunned. He took the letter and opened it. It was indeed Yi Hongyu's handwriting. In the letter, Yi Hongyu briefly described the process of chasing after Prince Longqing outside the north of Yan Kingdom. She didn't go into detail about the thunder by the Blue Lake. She only told him that Longqing was not dead, and that he had met up with the left king's palace with dozens of powerful fallen knights and escaped into the depths of the wilderness. Longqing was actually able to escape from Yi Hongyu's sword. This was very different from Ning Kei's prediction. He guessed that something must have happened, but since Yi Hongyu refused to tell him, there was nothing he could do. Thinking of the black peach blossom and the aura of quietus, Ning Kei felt uneasy and vigilant. He was very clear about how powerful and terrifying Longqing was now. Especially his strange devouring skill, it would make him powerful at an astonishing speed. That day in the autumn rain in front of the Red Lotus Temple, if Longqing hadn't been so shocked by the practice of Tao Tai that he only wanted to escape, he might have died in the hands of this person. Although there were no Haotian Taoism cultivators in the wilderness, there were many priests and sorcerers. Without preparation, these priests and sorcerers were the most delicious and fat lambs in Longqing's eyes. A person who should have died long ago refused to die, and became more and more terrifying and powerful. Ning Kei even felt a little admiration for Longqing. He slowly raised his eyebrows and thought silently, would the saying that they were lifelong enemies that had been circulating for years become a reality? Yi Hongyu's letter had 2 pieces of paper. On the second piece of paper she drew a sword. Ning Kei looked at the paper and felt the hidden sword style in it. He could vaguely feel the unwillingness and strength when she drew the sword. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart and murmured, "You actually have another realization so soon?" Can you not be so powerful? This will make me look very weak. Although he said so, in fact he was very grateful to Yi Hongyu. She drew a sword to let him know that she had another realization of the day sword. Naturally, she was worried that he would be too slow and would not be a match for Long Qing in the future. Of course, Ning Ke also understood that with the character of the Tao addict, apart from the above reasons, the more important reason should be that she was worried that he would fall too far behind and that it would be meaningless to kill him in the future. Cheng Lishue heard his previous words and could not help but say bitterly, "When I saw you in the wilderness, you had not yet entered the see-through state. Today you have actually entered the knowing destiny state. If this is considered weak, then should I immediately dig a hole and jump in front of you and the divine priest of judgment?" Ning Ke patted his shoulder to comfort him. A contented person will always be happy. Cheng Lishue almost spat out a mouthful of blood, staining his snow-white eyebrows. After a while, he said helplessly, "I finally understand why Prince Long Qing was so angry when he returned to the Divine Hall after losing to you in Chang'an. No matter who lost the opportunity to become a student of the headmaster of the academy, everyone would be as angry as him. Moreover, it is really difficult to sleep after losing to someone like you." Ning Ke said with a smile, "I did not do anything at that time. I only asked him if he wanted to eat a cake." Ordinary cultivation sects were naturally not qualified to participate in the meeting at the back hall of the Lank Temple. They could only wait in the middle of the temple and discuss. However, looking at their expressions, they were not very nervous or solemn. Those who could not look up at the sky naturally did not know how high the sky was. Those who could not come into contact with the true secrets naturally could not see the danger ahead and were easy to be happy. These cultivators still thought that the underworld invasion was only a legend, so of course they were not nervous. The 4 stone statues of the Venerable sat silently at the side of the hall. The hall was still quiet because only a few people were qualified to sit in the hall. Master Qishan sat in the middle, his thin face full of benevolence. Monk Guanhai stood beside him. Ning Ke and Sang Sang sat to the left of the master. Master Boishu, the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, sat to the right of the master. No matter how noble the other people in the hall were in the world, they had to show enough respect in front of the representatives of the 2 unknown places. Cheng Lishue represented the West Hill Divine Palace and sat to the right of Sang Sang. Cuni Mati, the powerhouse of the sword Garrett Cheng Ziqing Mo Shanshan, and the flower addict Lu Qinjia sat in order. Master Dong Ming, who presided over the second game of chess on the Hua Mountain, was also in the hall. However, he did not sit with the others but under the side wall. He looked at Sang Sang and smiled slightly, looking very calm and relaxed. There were only 10 people in the hall, but these 10 people could represent the entire cultivation world. Everyone knows that there will be a big show, so I have been constantly revising the outline. It took too much time and energy. This is the 2nd chapter. I have written a lot of the 3rd chapter, but I am thinking about how to change it. I will update it before 10 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 579. Master Qishan was the first to speak. He looked at the people in the hall and said tiredly, "Of course you don't think the legend is just a legend. There have been many signs of the everlasting night's arrival. The year before last, Mr. First of the Academy went to the cold region of the far north and found that the nights there had indeed lengthened and the temperature had dropped sharply. Even the hot sea had signs of being frozen." Cheng Lishue leaned forward slightly to greet the crowd and said, "The Hierarch Lord did indeed see a strange layer of ice deep in the sea of storms in the screen of light." Master Qishan sighed and said, "Mr. First also mentioned in the letter that Chang and city froze 2 days earlier and 3 days earlier than last year." Cheng Ziqing frowned slightly and said, "But this year Chang and city has entered autumn later than last year. I always thought that it was normal for the climate to change between years." At this moment, Master Boishu, the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple, said slowly, "There is no need to argue about this matter. The desolate men have come south, which proves that Mr. First's vision is not false. We cannot waste time on such pointless discussions. The first thing we need to consider is how to deal with the invasion of the underworld." After Master Boishu entered the Lank Temple, he had not come out. When they were on the mountain, he had sat silently in the Buddhist chariot. This was the first time many people in the hall, including Ning Ke, had seen his true face. The eminent monk's eyebrows were like a ruler and his eyes were pure. His brows were slightly frosty and there were a few wrinkles on his forehead. His Dharma image was solemn, but no one could guess his true age. Master Buoshu came from the unknown lands and was an important figure like the president of the commandment yard. In terms of status, he was undoubtedly the highest in the room. Therefore, when he spoke, Qing Ziqing shut his mouth and expressed his agreement. After the Xiankong temple confirmed that the underworld invasion was not a legend, the temple became even quieter. It was not easy to accept the fact that a legend had become a reality. Both Qing Ziqing and Quni Madi were silently thinking that they would encounter the end of the world that countless generations of cultivators had not encountered before. Master Buoshu looked around at the crowd and said sternly, "The underworld invasion must be a very long process. Perhaps our generation will not be able to experience it. But as the saying goes, the ancestors plant trees and the descendants benefit from the shade. For the survival of the human world, we must start preparing now." Everyone knew that they had to prepare, but what should they prepare? The hall once again became extremely quiet. Monk Guanhai walked out of the hall, took some hot water and began to serve tea to the guests. In the past, Master Qishan had doted on his young disciple and was unwilling to tell him too many gloomy stories about the future. So this was the first time he had participated in such an occasion. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that ordinary monks couldn't hear the discussion in the hall, he wouldn't have had the chance to do this job. Therefore he was a little excited and a little nervous. His hands trembled as he held the teacup. How could he notice how many tea leaves he had put in the teacup and what kind of tea leaves he had put in? Ning Ke was not interested in this kind of discussion. In his opinion, if the underworld really invaded, how could these people in the hall discuss the real countermeasures? Where did they put the Abbey Dean of Jishou Abbey, the chief preaching monk of Shenkong Temple, and the headmaster of Academy? However, the people in the back of the mountain of the Academy were a bunch of lazy people who did not like to care about worldly affairs. He was forcibly assigned the title of the person who entered the human realm, so he had to represent the Academy on such an occasion. But he did not expect that this discussion would soon involve himself. The underworld invasion requires Yama to project himself into our world, and it requires the body of the son of Yama as a channel. 16 years ago, there was a strange phenomenon in the wilderness, and the world wayfarers of various sects gathered there. It was because both Xiankong Temple and Jishou Abbey had sensed that the son of Yama had descended into our world. Master Buoshu said slowly, and then glanced at Ning Quebec. Ning Ke knew what his glance meant. He was slightly shocked, but his expression did not change. Quni Madi stared at him with hatred and said in a hoarse voice, "Then the most important thing we should do now is to find the son of Yama, and then, kill him." Master Qishan took the teacup from Monk Guanhai's hands, and lowered his head to blow lightly. He did not speak. Everyone in the hall knew who Quni Madi was alluding to. After all, after the battle between Ning Ke and Xia Ho, the judgment of the great divine priest of light had long been spread, and the Buddhism sect seemed to hold the same view. But without evidence, who would dare to say that the core disciple of the headmaster of the academy was the son of Yama? In the past year, no one had dared to say this in front of Ning Ke, and even the rumor had gradually faded. After all, no one had seen Yama, but all cultivators knew that the academy could not be angered. So when Quni Madi said this, no one in the hall responded. No one pretended to be ignorant and asked who the son of Yama was. It was still quiet. Quni Madi did not seem to expect to face such a situation. She raised her eyebrows, and her eyes became more and more resentful. She stared at Ning Ke and said, "Mr. 13, don't you have anything to say?" Ning Ke said, "I want to say, can you not beat around the bush?" Quni Madi was furious and her chest heaved up and down. She said sternly, "I am talking about you. You are the son of Yama." Ning Ke had long expected that someone would make things difficult for him today, but he did not know whether it would be Quni Madi or Master Buoshu. At this moment he finally confirmed that the old nun was indeed the most annoying creature. But after all, this was the first time that the rumor had been put on the table. The people in the hall had complicated looks in their eyes. Mo Shanshan looked at Ning Ke quietly with a slightly worried expression. Ning Ke looked at her and said calmly, "If you have no evidence, don't speak casually." Quni Madi sneered and said, "Back then the great divine priest of light determined that the son of Yama was born in the Xianwei general's mansion in Chang'an. Now you are the only living person in that mansion. If you are not the son of Yama, who is? So you are talking about my wife's teacher." Ning Ke said, "But he is already dead, so he can't be a witness. And even if what you said were his last words, this testimony has no effect. No matter how good one's eyesight is, there will be times when he makes a mistake. Don't forget that because of this matter, he was beaten down by the Abbey Dean and imprisoned by the Westhill Divine Palace for more than 10 years. If you insist that he is right, Does that mean that the Abbey Dean is wrong and the West Hill Divine Palace is wrong? Cuny Maddie was speechless for a moment. No matter how high her status in the Buddhism sect and the secular world was, no matter how respected she was, she would not dare to directly accuse the Abbey Dean of the Jisho Abbey of being wrong in public. Ning Ke looked at her and shook his head. He said, "You really don't know what you are talking about?" Then he looked at Cheng Lishue and asked, "I am not a troublemaker, and I don't think she has the guts to disrespect the entire Haoyin Taoism. But what did we say just now? What do you mean the whole family died?" Cheng Lishue smiled bitterly and did not speak. He thought to himself that Ning Ke was not afraid of offending people, but he did not want to become enemies with the old woman. Although Cuny Maddie did not know about the conversation between Ning Ke and Cheng Lishue, she knew that it was not something good when she heard that the whole family had died. Moreover, these 5 words happened to touch upon her greatest pain. She could not help but feel grief and anger at the same time, and the wrinkles on her face were full of resentment. Ning Ke looked at her calmly and said, "If you do not want to bring trouble to the Ueluan kingdom, then say something meaningful. Although you are of low status, you are not young. Don't mess around like you did in the wilderness." His voice was very calm and did not sound mean. However, between his words, there was a strong sense of an elder lecturing a junior, which could not be concealed. Cuny Maddie's grief and anger grew, and she trembled with anger. Master Bushu frowned slightly, as if he was dissatisfied with Ning Ke's performance. The lively argument in the hall was meaningless. Sang Sang knew that Ning Ke was not someone who was willing to be at a disadvantage, be it in terms of words or knives. Naturally, she was not worried and even a little distracted. She took a cup of tea from Monk Guanhai. The tea in the cup was not the green tea that Master Qishan was used to drinking, but scented tea. Sang Sang lowered her head and smelled the pure fragrance of the tea. She looked at the little jasmine flower floating in the clear tea and felt that she liked it very much. Ning Ke suddenly felt uneasy. Sang Sang picked up the teacup and was about to take a sip when she felt an inexplicable uneasiness. She frowned slightly and moved her wrist slightly, preparing to put the teacup down. The flower addict, Lu Qinjia, was unusually quiet in the hall today. She lowered her head and did not speak. Although she was the princess of the Ueluan kingdom and the focus of the West Hill Divine Palace, she could only be ranked last in terms of status and power in such an occasion. It was natural for her to remain silent. Moreover, she had been very quiet ever since she came to Hua Mountain. Even her expression was indifferent, so no one in the hall felt that there was anything strange about her. However, when Sang Sang picked up the cup of scented tea, she raised her head. Lu Qinjia's eyes were still cold and her expression was still indifferent. It was the same expression that made Ning Ke feel a chill in Hua Mountain. However, if one looked closely, one could see that her flower-like lips were trembling slightly. It was nervousness and excitement. Sang Sang frowned slightly and seemed to be about to put down the teacup. Lu Qinjia pursed her trembling lips and a sad but determined smile appeared on her face. She exerted some strength in her fingers, which were hidden in her sleeves, and broke the stem of a wilted flower. Its petals scattered in all directions. A faint aura was instantly released from her sleeves. A shocking change happened in the teacup in Sang Sang's hands. The jasmine flower that was slowly moving in the clear tea seemed to have been injected with some kind of vitality. It actually bloomed in the teacup. Several petals broke off the stem and struggled out of the tea. With a strong aura, it attacked Sang Sang's face. The teacup had just left Sang Sang's lips and was very close to her face. It was so close that it was difficult for her to react. Be it the West Hill divine skills or the Buddhist Dharma that she had just learned, she could not react in time. She widened her eyes and looked at the jasmine flower petals that were still in the tea flying towards her. At this moment she only had time to think. Chapter 3 delivered. Chapter 4 out before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 580. A few days ago in the Hua Mountain Monastery, Ning Ke and the flower addict had exchanged a few words through the wall. When he returned to the room to help Sang Sang dress, he handed her a brocade pouch and told her to remember to tell him in her heart if anything happened. Telling him in her heart was just thinking about it. That was why Sang Sang did not forget to think about it when she had no time to do anything in the face of the sudden attack. Ning Ke knew when she thought about it. That was why Ning Ke thought about it. With a thought, the silk pouch hidden in Sang Sang's sleeve was triggered. The light in the dark Buddhist hall suddenly changed shape, especially the space in front of Sang Sang. The powerful talisman power from the brocade pouch distorted it into countless overlapping mirrors. The jasmine flower petals that splashed out from the tea landed on those mirrors. The collision of the two auras caused a strong wind to blow in the hall. The dust that had accumulated in the cracks of the bricks was blown out, causing smoke and dust to rise. The petals landed on the mirrors and trembled as they tried to drill into them. However, they could only penetrate 2 or 3 layers before they became powerless and twisted. They were crushed into mud and scattered. The flower addict, Lu Qinjia, who was sitting in the corner, looked extremely shocked. Her beautiful face looked like it was in extreme pain. She spat out a mouthful of blood and wet her clothes. After a while, the aura of the talisman surrounding the Buddhist hall gradually dissipated. The countless layers of mirror protection in front of Sang Sang also disappeared without a trace. The powder of the jasmine petals mixed with the tea that had been torn into the finest water droplets and gently splashed on her face. It was slightly damp. Ning Ke slowly stood up and looked at Lu Qinjia without any emotion on his face. He had never been worried about his and Sang Sang's safety on this trip to the Lank Temple before he met the Buddhist chariot. Just as he had told Xian Zhilong, in this world, those who were stronger than him would not dare to provoke him because of his background. Those who were ignorant and dared to provoke him would not dare to provoke him. However, this was not an absolutely rational world. There were still lunatics like Long Qing, and many people would become crazy for various reasons such as losing their children or husbands. Ning Ke was very grateful to Long Qing for giving him a fatal blow in the autumn rain in front of the Red Lotus Temple. This allowed him to regain the cautiousness and calmness he had in Min Mountain. When he talked to Lu Qinjia in the monastery on Tile Mountain, especially when he saw her eyes, he had always been wary that this woman would go crazy like Long Qing. That was why he placed the brocade pouch beside Sang Sang. In that brocade bag there was a talisman left by Master Yen Sei. Although I can't accept it, I can understand. You've always wanted to kill me because of what happened to your fiancé, but this has nothing to do with Sang Sang. Why would you do this? Ning Ke asked Lu Qinjia. Lu Qinjia raised her arm and wiped the blood from the corner of her lips. A crazed smile appeared on her pale and beautiful face. She said, I am very sure that killing the current me can only free myself and not cause me pain. Since I want you to be in pain, why would I kill you? She stared at Ning Ke with hatred and said in a trembling voice, You once killed the most important person to me. Do you know how it feels? It was your entire world being destroyed in front of you. The more beautiful the past, the more painful it is for you to live now. You killed Long Qing, which is equivalent to destroying my world. You turned me into a walking corpse. I live in pain every day and struggle on the edge of collapse. Ning Ke said, Many people have experienced this kind of pain. No, you don't know. You will never know what kind of pain it is. Lu Qinjia cried and said pitifully, If you have never lost someone, how would you know that the pain would tear your heart into pieces? That's why I was really happy when I knew that Sang Sang was about to die. Ning Ke looked at her and said, When you found out that Master Qishan could cure Sang Sang's illness, you couldn't bear it anymore and decided to kill her yourself? Lu Qinjia looked at him and said in a daze, That's right. I wanted you to watch the most important person die in front of you. I wanted you to feel that kind of pain. Ning Ke said, It's a pity that I will never be able to feel the pain you are feeling now. But I am more curious. Long Qing is not dead yet. Where does your pain come from? Lu Qinjia smiled bitterly when she heard this. She said in extreme pain, Yes, he is not dead yet. But he has become neither a human nor a ghost. He is like a dog being chased by the West Hill Divine Palace into the wilderness. He has even abandoned the faith that he has held onto for half his life and turned into a devil. Isn't living like this scarier than dying? Compared to now, I would rather you shoot him to death in the wilderness that year. In my opinion, living in any way is better than dying. Ning Ke shook his head and said, I don't understand now. Do you like Long Qing as a person or do you like the Prince of the Yen Kingdom, the symbol hidden under the glorious appearance of the West Hill Divine Prince? If he is really the most important person to you, then no matter how his identity changes, how his standpoint changes, whether he is dazzling or ugly, whether he is a deity or a monster, whether he is a saint or a devil, he will still be the most important person in your heart. Unless you like that shell. But if you like that shell, it is still unreasonable for you to be in so much pain because of that shell. His voice was very calm. He was not deliberately sarcastic or harsh, but every word hit the heart. Lu Qinjia's face turned even paler. She said, I did not expect you to have the patience to talk to me for so long. Ning Ke shook his head and said, I just want to peel off your skin and make you feel more pain. His simple and sincere words sounded so cold when they entered the ears of the people in the hall. No one had expected the flower addict, Lu Qinjia, to suddenly assassinate Sang Sang while they were discussing the underworld invasion. No one knew how to deal with this. Not to mention Sang Sang's noble status in the West Hill Divine Palace, even Ning Ke would not let this go. What would he do? Not everyone in the hall had interacted with Ning Ke and knew his temperament as well as Cheng Lixue. But everyone knew the style of the people from the academy who had entered the human realm. Thinking of Mr. Ku, some people's expressions changed. Master Qishan sighed and looked at Lu Qinjia with pity. He said, "There are many people in the world who suffer from infatuation." Master Boshu looked at Ning Quebec. His lips moved slightly as he prepared to plead for the flower addict. After all, Lu Qinjia was the princess of the Yueluan kingdom, and the Yueluan kingdom was the most important and even the only secular kingdom of the Buddhism sect in the world. The people of the Buddhism sect could not just watch as something happened to her. Ning Ke did not give Master Boshu a chance to plead for her. With a clang he unsheathed his padao. He stood in front of the futon and slashed through the air. As he slashed down, the padao in his hand suddenly became bright. Countless rays of golden light shot out from the gloomy saber body. Like the sun rising from the clouds, it lit up the dark hall and covered the flower addict, Lu Qinjia. Divine light. Cheng Ziqing, a powerhouse from the sword garret, looked at the golden light that shot out from Ning Ke's padao. Back when Lu Yiqing was defeated by Ning Ke at the side door of the academy, there was news that Ning Ke had learned the West Hill divine skills. However, the sword garret did not believe it and felt that there was something fishy about it. Until today, when he saw Ning Ke's padao burning with Hao Yan's divine light, Cheng Ziqing finally knew that the rumors were true. Cheng Lixue, the priest of the West Hill Divine Palace, had a complicated expression on his face. He had seen Ning Ke's padao burning with divine light at the side door of the academy, but he did not expect the divine light on his padao to become even stronger. The powerhouses in the hall looked at the blade and their expressions turned cold. They were watching from the side so they did not have to close their eyes. However, the flower addict, Lu Qinjia, was covered by the divine light that shot out from the padao and had to close her eyes. In fact, she had already closed her eyes before Ning Ke waved his padao. She did not want to live, so she was waiting for death. However, there was no one who could just watch her die without doing anything. Cuny Maddie screamed and jumped up from the futon. She came in front of Lu Qinjia and held her walking stick horizontally. An experienced and pure Buddhist aura was born from the momentum. Ning Ke's padao swept through the hall and landed heavily on the walking stick. Hao Yan's divine light and the thick Buddhist aura on the walking stick clashed and scattered in all directions like a burning flame. Cuny Maddie closed her eyes tightly. The deep wrinkles on her face were clearly illuminated by the divine light. It was as if there were countless golden lines on her face, and it was like molten lava that could collapse at any time. In just an instant, the old woman's hands, which were holding onto the two ends of the walking stick, trembled violently. Her face looked especially painful. With a muffled groan, she fell and hit the wall, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Ning Ke's padao momentum was exhausted. He lifted his right foot and walked to the other side. Cuny Maddie sat leaning against the wall, her body covered in blood. She looked at the approaching Ning Ke, her old face full of fear and pain. She screamed angrily, "What are you waiting for?" No one in the hall knew who this old aunt was seeking help from. Master Boshu sighed softly and formed a mudra with his hands in front of him. The mudra was very strange. The index finger of the right hand was slightly bent, like a naughty child flicking a stone. A merciful and chilling aura of the Buddhism sect attacked Ning Quebec. Master Boshu was the president of the commandment yard of the Shenkong Temple. If one were to judge him by his cultivation state, he was at least in the knowing destiny state. No one in the hall could rival him except for Cheng Ziqing. Ning Ke's real cultivation state was still far from this eminent monk's. He had been able to intimidate the monk on Tile Mountain because he had the primordial 13 arrows in his hands. Moreover, that arrow had been prepared for a long time and was extremely powerful. Today in the hall, Ning Ke was holding a padao instead of a bow. However, there was no fear on his face. He ignored the power of the Buddhist mudra and rushed forward. Cuny Maddie shouted angrily and tried to raise her crutch again. Ning Ke slashed down. The crutch broke and Cuny Maddie vomited blood again. The Buddhist mudra had already reached Ning Ke's back. Ning Ke raised his eyebrows and the tip of the padao swept past Lu Qinjia's cheek. Then his left hand formed a bird's beak by his side. The aura of the Buddhist mudra paused slightly. Ning Ke floated back and stood in front of Sang Sang. The Buddhist mudra finally landed on the ground. There was a soft rustling sound and the hard stone floor of the hall sank slightly. A strand of hair fell from Lu Qingjia's face. A bloody wound appeared on her face. Chapter 4. There are 2 more chapters today. The update will be late. Everyone has to work tomorrow, so go to bed early. Also, it's past midnight now and it's already November. The new monthly votes have arrived. Everyone hurry up and vote for me. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 581. Lu Qingjia felt that her face was wet and cold. She reached out her hand and felt the blood on her hand. Looking at her blood-stained hand, she was in a trance. She squeezed out a smile on her pale face and slowly raised her hands to cover her face. Then she suddenly burst into tears. Tears and blood dripped down from the gaps between her fingers. She cried in pain, not because of the wound on her face and the possibility of disfigurement, but because she realized that it was difficult for her to avenge Long Qing in front of Ning Quebec. The people in the temple looked at the flower addict, who was crying bitterly and covering her face. They looked at the ground that had been crushed by Master Bushu's emblematic gesture. They looked at Ning Ke, who was standing silently with his blade. The academy enjoyed a high prestige in the cultivation world, but that was because the headmaster of the academy was highly respected. He was also related to the legendary Mr. First and Mr. Second. However, few people thought that Ning Ke was very strong. No one knew whether it was from the Tao addict or the calligraphy addict, but everyone agreed that Ning Ke was the weakest world wayfarer in the history of the unknown lands. Even though he had challenged and killed Xia Ho at the Cold Winter Lake last year, the powerhouses in the cultivation world thought that it was mainly because General Xia Ho had been seriously injured by Tang, the wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine, and Sang Sang, the Lady of Light, had performed amazingly in that battle. This had nothing to do with his talent and understanding. In their eyes, Ning Ke had only been in the academy for a few years. Even if he had the opportunity to enter the knowing destiny state, it was not long ago. How could he not be at a disadvantage when faced with the Shenkong Temple's eminent monks? Moreover, he had seriously injured Cuny Maddie and cut the flower addict's face before retreating. That was the flower addict, who was famous for her beauty among the 3 addicts in the world. How could Ning Ke be so cruel to her? While everyone in the hall was shocked by Ning Ke's strength, they were also frightened by his ruthlessness. Ning Ke did not care about what others thought. The rules of the academy were simple. Other than the toughness of one's fist, the most important thing was the principle of reciprocity. If you wanted to kill me, I would definitely kill you. If you wanted to kill Sang Sang, I would kill you even more. If not for Master Bushu's powerful Buddhist sect handprint, his blade would have cut off Lu Qingjia's head. Shenkong Temple wants to interfere in the academy's affairs? Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu. Ever since he saw the Buddhist chariot on Tile Mountain, he had been on guard. He knew the relationship between the Buddhism sect and the Yueluan kingdom, but he didn't know how far they would go. Master Bushu looked at him silently. His gaze landed on his left hand, which was at the side of his waist. When he displayed the emblematic gesture of the Buddhism sect, Ning Ke's left hand made a beak gesture. It was precisely that beak-like technique that caused the downward momentum of the giant handprint to stagnate. Master Bushu did not know the origin of Ning Ke's hand gesture and guessed that it was a supreme art of the academy. However, he still did not understand why Ning Ke seemed to have such a deep understanding of the Buddhism sect's giant handprint. In the eyes of the people in the hall, Master Bushu's silence was due to another reason. Cuny Maddie held Lu Qingjia in her arms. She looked at the blood on her face and thought of her son who had died tragically in Chang'an. Her expression became even more vicious. She stared at Ning Ke fiercely and shouted with a hoarse and painful voice, "You bastard! You killed Master Daosher of Shenkong Temple and injured Qingjia like this. Yueluan will never forgive you. Even Buddha will not forgive you." Everyone in the hall was silent. Everyone knew that the battle between Master Daosher of Shenkong Temple and Ning Ke on the morning street of Chang'an was, in a sense, a challenge from the Buddhism sect to the people of the academy who had entered the human realm. No matter how one looked at it, Ning Ke had not done anything wrong. However, everyone knew very well why Cuny Maddie was so sad. "You kill me, I kill you?" Ning Ke said. Long Qing betrayed Haoyin. The West Hill Divine Palace has issued an edict that everyone has the right to kill him. Princess Qingjia tried to kill the Lady of Light for this thief. What's wrong with me punishing her on behalf of the Divine Hall? Everyone in the hall looked at Priest Cheng Lishue, who was the true representative of the West Hill Divine Palace. Cheng Lishue's expression was calm and he did not speak. Not to mention that the flower addict had indeed violated the West Hill Divine Palace's taboo. Even if she had not, the Divine Hall would not have said anything about Ning Ke being the future husband of the Lady of Light. Ning Ke looked at Kunimati and said, "As for Daoshir dying in my hands, you can do it if you want to avenge your illegitimate son. Why do you have to involve the Buddhism sect in Yueluan Kingdom? I really want to know whether Buddha can't tolerate me or you, an old nun who doesn't follow the precepts." Hearing this, Master Bushu's expression froze. Ning Ke looked at him and repeated his previous question, "Is the Xiankong Temple sure about this? The Buddha is merciful. The Xiankong Temple has held this belief and has rarely participated in the affairs of the secular world. I should not have interfered in the feud between you and Princess Qinjia." Master Bushu's expression gradually became serious. His voice was like the ringing of a bell. He said, "However, Mr. 13 has actually entered the devil's way. How can the Xiankong Temple ignore it? I saw it with my own eyes. How can I ignore it?" Hearing this, everyone in the hall looked at Ning Ke's feet. Their expressions became strange. Only then did Ning Ke notice that there were a few pieces of gravel under his feet. There was a small gray dot at the waist of his black academy uniform. Judging by the color, it should be a mark left by a stone. Only then did he remember that Master Bushu's Buddhism sect emblematic gesture was a little strange. The right hand was stretched out and the index finger was slightly bent. It looked like a child flicking a stone. So he was really flicking a stone. A cultivator's body was as fragile as an ordinary person's. Even a powerhouse at the peak of the knowing destiny state could be easily cut open by a butcher. Of course, that was if the powerhouse did not fight back. Only two kinds of cultivators could use their own bodies to shatter a hard stone. In the previous battle, no one had felt Ning Ke use his psyche power to summon the chi of heaven and earth to protect his body. This naturally meant that the rumors of him cultivating in both talisman and martial arts were not true. At the same time, it also meant that he was cultivating in the devil's doctrine, which could not be allowed in the world. There was dead silence in the hall. No one spoke. No one knew what to say at this time. Cheng Lishua looked at Ning Ke in shock. As the saying went, Taoism and the devil could not coexist. As the Grand Master of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace, he should have stood up angrily and killed a cultivator who had joined the devil. However, Ning Ke was not an ordinary person. He was Mr. 13 of the Academy, the core disciple of the headmaster of the Academy. Even if the Hierarch Lord was present, he would also feel that this matter was very troublesome, let alone Cheng Lishua. Cheng Lishua's mind was in a mess. He wanted to stand up but he did not want to. He did not know what to do. At this moment he suddenly saw Sang Sang and calmed down. He felt very lucky. With the Lady of Light above, he did not have the right to represent the West Hill Divine Palace to express their stance on this matter. As for the close relationship between the Lady of Light and Ning Ke, it would not mean that the Divine Hall would send down a thunderbolt. So what did it have to do with him? After confirming that Ning Ke had joined the devil, the hall was silent for a long time. But eventually someone would express their stance, and that person's stance was very firm and strong. Aunt Kunimati laughed as she coughed up blood. Her laughter was full of joy and madness. She looked at Ning Ke and shouted fiercely, "I want to see if Buddha will tolerate you." Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu quietly. He thought that the Xiankong Temple was indeed the legendary unknown place. The chief monk was indeed skillful to be able to use the Dharma to make the stone fall on his academy uniform. Then he understood that this matter must have been planned by the high monk of the Xiankong Temple. Otherwise, no one would think of doing this in such a tense situation. Thinking of his teacher's advice, he shook his head. The headmaster had once told him that after youngest uncle cultivated the Great Spirit, he did not allow any enemy to touch his body. Therefore, even if all the cultivators in the world guessed that youngest uncle had joined the devil, no one dared to point it out. Ning Ke had hunted and chopped firewood since he was a child and had developed the habit of close combat. Therefore, it was easy for him to forget his teacher's advice. Moreover, he had become overconfident after entering the knowing destiny state. He did not expect the monks of the Xiankong Temple to have something on him. But so what? The whole world knew that youngest uncle had joined the devil, but no one dared to mention it. Although he was not as strong as youngest uncle had been, he was stronger than him in some aspects. Why should he be afraid of these people? I don't believe in Buddha, so I don't have to worry about whether Buddha will tolerate me. Ning Ke looked at Kunimati and said, "Moreover, do you think I will join the devil just because you say so? There is no such logic in the world." Kunimati was slightly stunned. She did not expect that under such circumstances, This person could still talk about logic without batting an eyelid. She shouted angrily, everyone in the hall saw it. What they saw is true. The great divine priest of light had good eyesight, but he still made a mistake. And even if it is true, there is known even. I will not admit it. He looked into Cuny Mattie's eyes and said mockingly, how can you prove it? Then he turned to look at the rest of the people in the hall and asked, how can you prove it? He shook his head and said, if you want to prove it, then fight again. Maybe my leg will be pierced by your swords in the next moment. Who will pay for my medical expenses then? Master Bushu was silent for a moment and said, is this a threat? Ning Kei said, you can understand it this way. Cuny Mattie shouted harshly, how can the academy have such a scoundrel like you? Ning Kei said, I am indeed good at being a scoundrel and can rank first in the academy. Even youngest uncle could not compare to me. So, don't do such meaningless things. The academy is still as arrogant as before. Master Bushu suddenly laughed and looked at him. I wonder what is more meaningful in the eyes of the headmaster and in the eyes of the academy. Master Chishan, who had been sitting silently on the futon, suddenly felt alarmed. He looked up at Bushu with a stern and warning look. Does the underworld invasion count? Bushu did not seem to feel Master Chishan's gaze at all. He looked at Ning Kei and the smile on his face gradually disappeared, leaving only dignity and solemnity. He shouted, does it count if you are the son of Yama? If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 582. There are many people in the world who have joined the devil. Do you think this is enough to make me, the president of Commandment Yard, leave Shenkong Temple? There is only one reason for me to leave Shenkong Temple. Master Bushu's Dharma idol was majestic. He looked at Ning Kei and shouted, I want to see if you are the son of Yama. You are cruel and have joined the devil. If you are the son of Yama, even the headmaster will not protect you. Ning Kei stared at the monk's gem-like eyes and was silent for a long time. Last winter, he had announced his identity in front of the world in front of the Chang'an Palace. Even earlier, when the Tang military found out about his relationship with the general's mansion, there was a rumor in the world. The rumor said that the great divine priest of light had already seen that Ning Kei was the legendary son of Yama 16 years ago. Cuny Mattie had also mentioned this before. Ning Kei had been nervous and confused because of this rumor, but gradually relaxed after the headmaster's explanation. Furthermore, with the academy behind him, no one dared to mention this rumor in front of him. Ning Kei did not care that Cuny Mattie had mentioned it before, because he knew that it was the old nun's way of venting her anger and shame. It did not affect him at all. However, Master Bushu's words now made him a little fearful. Master Bushu came from Shenkong Temple and was not an ignorant child. He could not publicly accuse a disciple of the academy of being the son of Yama just based on rumors. It was undoubtedly the most serious accusation in the world. There was another important reason that made Ning Kei nervous. It was the warning sign he had felt when he saw the Buddhist chariot on Tile Mountain. Until now, he still did not know what the warning was referring to. Could it be this accusation? Is this the typical process of a righteous sect seeking a righteous cause for a personal grudge? Ning Kei looked at Master Bushu and said mockingly, I am very glad that the academy is one of the famous sects in the world. If I was really an ordinary cultivator, wouldn't I be framed to the point where not even a speck of dust would be left? Master Bushu said, I say that you are the son of Yama. Naturally, I have proof. Ning Kei said, I am very curious. What proof do you speak of? He could not be truly curious. Until today he was still the first suspect in the world to be the son of Yama. The second suspect, Prince Long Qing, had already disappeared into the wilderness. However, at this moment he could not show any nervousness. Master Bushu looked at him quietly and took out a copper bell from his sleeve. The bell was of a common copper color, but its design was somewhat unique. It was round and broad and looked more like a small bell. Master Chishan looked at the bell and his expression changed. He shouted, Baoshu, put that bell down. Obviously, Baoshu had no respect for his uncle master today. He looked at Ning Kei indifferently and held the copper bell in his right hand. He said, this bell is called Yulan, also known as the cleansing bell. Looking at this copper bell, Cheng Ziqing remembered that his senior brother had once mentioned a certain Buddhist celestial device. His pupils shrank and he said in disbelief, is this the legendary Yulan bell? When Master Dongming saw the bell, he had already guessed it. When he heard the name of the bell, he was shocked and speechless. Madi was surprised and delighted. The autumn wind blew in from outside the hall and caressed the copper bell between his fingers, making a crisp sound. The sound of the bell was crisp, but there was absolutely no coldness in it. It sounded extremely gentle and compassionate. The moment the bell rang, Ning Ke remembered that a few days ago on the mountain road of Hua Mountain, the bell had sounded before the Buddhist chariot had arrived. At that time the kingfishers had jumped to welcome it. It was an extraordinary scene. He frowned slightly, feeling that something troublesome was about to happen. Master Bushu held the copper bell between his fingers and said benevolently, "The Yulan flower grows in the far west Pure Land and is the best at suppressing evil. The copper used to make this bell was nurtured in the Yulan flower field for tens of thousands of years and was the purest. It was then cast into a bell and cultivated with Buddha in the world for countless years." Ning Ke looked at the copper bell between Master Bushu's fingers and suddenly said, "From your introduction and everyone's reaction, I can roughly guess that you are going to say that this copper bell can find the whereabouts of the son of Yama." Master Bushu said solemnly, "That's right." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "If this copper bell is really so useful, why would the West Hill Divine Palace kill so many people in order to find the son of Yama? Why would the great divine priest of light be imprisoned for more than a decade?" Master Bushu said, "That is because the son of Yama had just descended and had not yet awakened." Ning Ke asked, "Then how do you know that the son of Yama has awakened?" Master Bushu said, "The awakening of the son of Yama is a natural omen. Otherwise, why would the divine priest of light break out of Peach Mountain and go to Chang and to find you?" Ning Ke said, "You are talking. Who knows if the bell in your hand is the legendary Yulan bell? Perhaps you picked it up in one of the meditation rooms in the temple. Return it quickly. Otherwise, when the old monk in the meditation room wakes up in the middle of the night and finds that the copper bell on his belt is gone, he will be scared to death." This was a joke that was extremely disrespectful to the Buddhism sect and blasphemous to the Lank Temple. However, no one in the temple laughed. The expressions on everyone's faces became more and more complicated. Master Bushu looked at him and said, "If it is just an ordinary copper bell, why don't you listen to it?" Ning Ke said, "Why should I listen to it? Don't you think it looks stupid?" Master Bushu said calmly, "If the bell has no effect on you, then you are naturally not the son of Yama. When the time comes, the Shenkong Temple will naturally clear your name." Ning Ke smiled and shook his head. He took out a handkerchief from his sleeve and looked at him seriously. "This is the treasure of the academy, the Tianluo handkerchief. It can subdue all evil in the world. Now I suspect that the Buddha is the son of Yama. Do you want to dig out his ashes and let me fan him with this handkerchief?" Master Bushu ignored his vicious mockery and said, "I can let you try." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "I do not suspect that you are the son of Yama. I suspect the Buddha." Master Bushu suddenly smiled and said, "Mr. 13, you are afraid?" It was not fear but vigilance. It was the vigilance and uneasiness of the Buddhist chariot when he heard the bell on the mountain path. Ning Ke said to himself in his heart. Then he had to admit that he was indeed afraid. The rumor that he was the son of Yama was his biggest fear. He glanced at Sang Sang. Master Bushu said in a low voice, "You want to leave?" Just as Ning Ke was about to retort, he suddenly heard a very tired and soft voice. "Don't let the copper bell ring." He could tell that it was Master Qishan's voice and his body stiffened. Master Qishan sat on the futon with his body hunched. His dry lips moved slightly and his voice was only audible to Ning Quebec. "Even if you kill Bushu, don't let the copper bell ring." Ning Ke felt a chill. The bell must be extraordinary to make Master Qishan so nervous. Most importantly, he remembered the conversation he had with the master that night by the stream. So, the prerequisite to saving the world is to kill the son of Yama? There are other ways besides killing him. What ways? For example, let him cultivate in Buddhism and then be purified by light. Master, why do I feel like you are talking about me? Was he really the son of Yama? Ning Ke was still bickering with Bushu with a smile on his face, but there was no smile in his heart. It was cold and even a little dazed. He looked at Master Bushu and asked, "Since you can determine who the son of Yama is by ringing the bell, why didn't you ring it for the past few days? Why did you wait until now to ring it?" Master Bushu said, "The bell is a Buddha's ritual implement. There are strict conditions to use it. The listener needs to be within a certain distance from the bell, and the listener needs to chant scriptures to clear their minds." Ning Ke said, "Then you can't do anything to me as long as I stay away from the bell." Master Bushu said, "If you don't dare to listen, it is also a form of proof. Besides, Can you walk out of the Lang temple today? Ning Ke suddenly laughed and said, Is that so? I'd like to see who dares to stop me. After saying this, he put his hands behind his back, feeling very carefree and at ease. In fact, he was preparing to receive something. Sang Sang, who was blocked by his body, took off the arrow box and prepared to assemble the bow. Of course, in order to clear the suspicion of the academy, I am willing to listen. Ning Ke looked at Bushu and said with a smile, Master, please chant scriptures to clear your mind. I really want to know what is so strange about this bell. He was already prepared. In the next moment, Sang Sang handed the iron bow to him and shot at Bushu. Perhaps 1 or 2 arrows would not kill him. He would shoot all 13 iron arrows and then escape the Lang temple with Sang Sang, never to return. At this moment, Master Bushu seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. He smiled and said, Even though I did not practice silent meditation with Qin Yen, I know some ways of chanting in silence. Hearing this, Ning Ke's heart tightened. The so-called chanting in silence naturally meant that one did not need to chant scriptures to be effective. While he was multitasking, Master Bushu might have already silently read the scripture to open the bell in his heart. Ning Ke knew that he had to move. Before the iron bow was handed to him, he could only hold the hilt of his knife. With a flick of his wrist, the heavy padao with Hao Yan's divine light slashed at Master Bushu. At the same time, he stretched out his left index finger and drew a sharp line in the air in front of him. Master Bushu's expression did not change. He put his left hand together and a strong Buddhist aura formed a vague giant handprint in front of him. It grasped the terrifying knife momentum. The knife momentum was broken again, and the giant handprint disappeared. However, the small bronze bell in Master Bushu's right hand had already begun to shake gently. The crisp sound of a bell rang out in the hall. It was different from the bell that had rung on the mountain path. It was the same compassion, but it was not gentle. Instead, it was full of majesty, as if it could suppress all evil in the world. The bell rang out of the temple and throughout the entire Lang temple. There were 17 ancient bells in the Lang temple. They were either in the pavilions, behind the temple, under the corridors, or beside the plum trees. These 17 ancient bells rang almost at the same time. The deep and bright bell rang out between the eaves of the yellow temple. But it could not cover the crisp and indifferent bell. The bell rang again and the bell gradually flew away. It flew all the way to the peak of Tile Mountain. The stone statue of Buddha was quiet in the clouds, and a solemn light of Buddha gradually appeared. Chapter 6 ends. I'm going to write some more and count it in the first update. I have many things to do today, and I'm so sleepy that I'm worried I won't be able to write. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 583. The tourists who attended the Yulan Hungry Ghost Festival went to the small town with the floats. Only a few stalls selling candy sticks were left. The ambassadors and the girls from the House of Red Sleeves were brought to the Hua Mountain by the monks to enjoy the scenery. The front temple had gradually returned to its peaceful appearance. The ordinary cultivation sects were still waiting for news from the rear temple and the middle temple. However, they did not care and naturally would not sit still in the temple. Instead, they walked around, entering the temple and worshipping the Buddhas when they saw them. Outside a slightly remote temple, the crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom climbed up from the ground with difficulty. He looked at the broken temple door with extreme fear in his eyes. He even subconsciously avoided Xie Qingyun's support. Xie Qingyun did not know what had happened in the temple. He once again reached out to help the crown prince up. He looked into the temple and said angrily, "Your Highness, who is so daring? I will send someone to capture him and interrogate him." The South Jin Kingdom was a powerful country in the world, and the crown prince was even more arrogant. He would not be at a disadvantage even when facing Ning Ke, a disciple of the academy on the Hua Mountain. However, when he heard Xie Qingyun's words, his face instantly turned pale and he said repeatedly, "No, no. Leave this temple immediately." The light in the temple was relatively dim, and this side temple was no exception. If not for some light leaking in through the broken door, one would not have been able to see what was going on inside. There were also 2 stone statues in this temple. 2 people were looking at the 2 statues of the venerable ones. One was wearing a plain robe with a simple Taoist bun. He carried a wooden sword on his back. He was the world wayfarer of Haoyan Taoism, Yisu. The other was strong and wore a rarely seen animal skin robe in the Central Plains. He was the world wayfarer of the Devil's Doctrine, Tang. The crown prince of the South Jin Kingdom must have been thrown out of the temple by one of them. It was no wonder that the crown prince was so afraid facing such too powerful world wayfarer. Yisu said, "You did not kill the crown prince of the South Jin kingdom. So I will not attack you in the temple today." Tang's voice was a little low and humming. "I am not interested in killing. But aren't the royal families in the Central Plains dogs of the West Hill Divine Palace? Why would you care about a dog?" Yisu said with a smile, "Haotian Taoism and the secular world are mutually reinforcing. You don't know that the Jisho Abbey has to support many people, and they are very picky. So we really need the royal family to help us earn money." Tang looked at him and said, "You are able to admit the decadence of Taoism. You speak more directly now and you look more pleasing to the eye. But when did the wooden sword on your back have a scabbard?" Yisu said, "When I was young, I always felt that there was no place in the world that I couldn't go and that there was no one I couldn't defeat. I was extremely proud, so how could I be willing to keep the Taoist sword in its sheath? Now that I'm getting older, I've also understood some more truths. A sword in its sheath is still a sword. Even if it withdraws its edge, it doesn't necessarily lose its sharpness." Dun said, "It seems that your trip to Chang'an has been fruitful." Yisu said, "You should also go to Chang'an and live for a while." Dun said, "I'll go if I have the chance." Yisu turned to look at him and said, "You don't even dare to go to Chang'an. Why do you dare to come to Lank Temple?" Dun said, "In the past you wanted to kill me every time you saw me. Why don't you do it today?" Yisu said, "Because I only realized after coming to Lank Temple that the devil's doctrine has been destroyed after the Lotus sect massacred the ancient temple decades ago. Even if you are alive you can't change anything." Dun said, "Do you think that today will be the same as that day decades ago?" Yisu shook his head and said, "Back then, the Divine Lord Lotus and Mr. Ku were already invincible. Today the two people in the temple may have unlimited potential, especially one of them. But after all, only Xiao He has shown his talent." Dun said, "Are you sure that the academy won't do anything?" Yisu said, "This is a Buddhist temple. It's the mute who needs to worry about this, not us." Dun said, "So you don't go to the back temple, but stay here and stare at the statue of the Venerable?" Yisu said, "It's the same for you?" Dun said, "Because I respect the academy, so I don't want to stain my hands with blood." Yisu said after a moment of silence, "It's because I still don't understand." Dun said, "There are also things that Taoism doesn't understand?" Yisu said, "Even the Divine Lord of Light was not wrong back then, let alone me." Dun said, "I really want to know how far Ning Ke will go." Yisu said, "He is an extremely realistic and selfish person. He won't have the courage to fight against the whole world." Dun shook his head and said, "You look more human now, but that's only because of the smoke from the houses in Chang'an. In fact, after breaking through the death door, you don't understand the thoughts of a normal person at all." Yisu thought for a moment and nodded. "That makes sense." At this moment, a bell rang in the Lank Temple. It buzzed continuously and could be heard everywhere. Yisu slowly closed his eyes and searched for the sound of the bell. "It's starting." He walked out of the side hall and walked to the back temple. Dun looked at the stone statue of the Venerable in front of him. After a moment of silence, he also left the hall. The cultivators in the middle temple were alarmed by the bell and walked out. They held the railings and looked toward the mountain. Yisu and Dun walked through the crowd. No cultivators noticed them. No one would have thought that these two were the legendary world wayfarers. The bell rang incessantly along the way. The light of Buddha in the Lank Temple grew brighter. Countless auras of heaven and earth gathered and formed a barrier above the temple that could only be sensed but not seen. It contained supreme power. The wooden sword on Yisu's back seemed to sense it and buzzed softly. Dun's right foot crushed a brick. Yisu looked up at the sky and frowned slightly. He said, "The Buddhism sect has been silent for tens of thousands of years. I didn't expect them to hide such a powerful technique. My sword can pass through but I can't." Dun looked down at the broken brick under his feet and said in a low voice, "I can try to pass through underground." The two came to the back temple of the Lank Temple. Looking at the tightly shut black door in front of him and feeling the changes in the hall, Yisu's expression suddenly became extremely shocked. He said with mixed emotions, "My master sensed it in the South Sea, so he asked me to come back from the north to take a look. However, he probably didn't expect this to be the truth." In the back hall of the Lank Temple. When the bell rang, Ning Ke's finger had yet to draw the complete line in the air, so he didn't continue. Instead, he guarded his sense of perception and stood where he was, ready to resist Buddha's power. The Yulan bell was indeed a ritual implement that Buddha always carried with him. Accompanied by the clear sound, A benevolent and majestic Buddha's nature entered his ears and silently entered his sense of perception. In an instant, countless illusions appeared in Ning Kei's mind. Those indescribably filthy and ugly devil bodies and those indescribably charming heavenly ladies kept shuttling back and forth, sometimes near and sometimes far away. They exuded all kinds of temptations and fears, leading him to the Pure Land or the underworld. Ning Kei's sense of perception was violently torn and he was in great pain. However, his sense of perception still had fragments of Master Lotus consciousness, so he woke up from the illusion in a very short time. After confirming that Buddha's Yulan bell was not as powerful as he had imagined, and that he could even survive it without entering the knowing destiny state, he decided to resolve this matter as quickly as possible. The Yulan bell did not affect him. He looked at Master Bushu in front of him, ready to fight him to the death. However, the look in Master Bushu's eyes was very strange. Bushu looked at Ning Kei in a daze. He looked a little frightened but more confused. The rest of the people in the hall also had strange looks in their eyes. They looked at him as if they had seen a ghost. They were shocked, frightened, and confused. Ning Kei looked down at his body and found nothing strange. There was no bloody hole in his chest like Long Qing, so he also felt strange. He looked up at Bushu and the people in the hall again. All of a sudden he felt extreme panic. Because this time he finally saw clearly that people were not looking at him but behind him. Ning Kei turned around. Sang Sang sat on the futon. Her little face was very pale, and the ground in front of her was mottled with blood. She was not coughing up blood but spitting it out. The bell continued to ring in the Lank Temple. There was a puff. She spat out another mouthful of blood, drenching her black cotton robe and the brick floor. A beam of Buddha's light penetrated the hall and fell on her body. The beam of Buddha's light was so merciful yet so cold. In the Buddha's light, Sang Sang's face looked even paler, and her thin body looked even smaller. She looked at Ning Kei outside the Buddha's light and cried silently. Master Bushu looked at Sang Sang in shock. Kuni Mati looked at Sang Sang in shock. Qing Ziqing looked at Sang Sang in shock. Qing Lishua looked at Sang Sang in shock. Everyone in the hall looked at Sang Sang, their expressions extremely shocked. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Master Qishan let out a painful sigh. Master Bushu's expression was complicated as he murmured, "Buddha is merciful." "I see." Master Qishan looked at Ning Kei and said in pain, "The truth is as you see now. You are not the son of Yama. She is the daughter of Yama." Looking at Sang Sang in pain in the Buddha's light, Ning Kei felt like he had been abandoned by the whole world. It was just like how he had felt in the woodshed many years ago. If he had to choose what he wanted to choose, then he would have been abandoned by the whole world. The reason why he felt like he had been abandoned by the whole world was because he knew that he would choose what he wanted to choose. Just like many years ago he had picked up the chopper in the end. Since it was his own choice, then it was not the whole world that had abandoned him. It was he who had abandoned the whole world. He walked into the Buddha's light and opened the big black umbrella to cover Sang Sang's head. Just one chapter for today. I'm tired and even a little excited. In fact, my brain is very messed up. I will update 4 chapters tomorrow as compensation for the beginning of the month. But I think this chapter is very well written. If you agree, please vote for your precious monthly ticket. Thank you. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 584. Ning Kei walked into the light of Buddha and opened the big black umbrella. His movements were natural, just as he had done all these years, shielding her from the wind and the rain. There was no need for him to think. This was his habit, and it was stronger than the light of Buddha. The people in the hall were still in absolute shock, so they did not react to Ning Kei's actions, nor did they have time to think about what they meant. They looked at the pale Sang Sang in the light of Buddha. Master Bushu was shocked speechless. Even he, the one who rang the bell, did not expect the truth revealed by the Yulan bell to be this. He had left the Shenkong temple and stepped into the mortal world to come to the Tile Mountain. All his preparations were because he firmly believed that the son of Yama was Ning Quebec. How could he think of Sang Sang? Kuni Mati and the others were even at a loss. Qing Lishua was the most shocked. As the priest of the Revelation Department of the West Hill Divine Palace, his face was even whiter than his eyebrows. He could not understand how the daughter of light that the West Hill Divine Palace had recognized suddenly became the daughter of Yama. What did the daughter of Yama mean? Compared to this matter, no one cared about Ning Kei's joining the devil. Although the devil's doctrine had withered for many years, it was still common for cultivators to join the devil's doctrine. Sang Sang had become the cause of the world's destruction. The light of Buddha from the Buddha statue on the top of the tile mountain ignored all physical barriers in the mortal world and fell through the roof of the back hall of the Lank temple in a magical way. It looked like gold powder mixed with pearl powder and then ignited by the sun, looking extremely solemn and magnificent. The big black umbrella opened above Sang Sang's head. The light of Buddha collided with the black and greasy umbrella surface and scattered in all directions. The scene was exceptionally beautiful and thrilling. For some reason, the light of Buddha did not penetrate the umbrella and sputtered like ordinary rain. However, the light of Buddha was vast and boundless. It was visible to the naked eye and was not comparable to an autumn rain. It was more like a waterfall formed by countless rays of light, falling continuously on the big black umbrella. The big black umbrella was like a black stone in the waterfall, being constantly washed and hit. No matter how strong it was, it gradually began to tremble. Ning Kei's right hand, which was holding the umbrella handle, trembled slightly. He did not feel any majestic power coming from the umbrella handle, but he clearly felt the horrible power of Buddha outside the umbrella. Every bone in his body began to creak. What was more disturbing was that the grease and dust on the surface of the big black umbrella, which had not been washed away by the rain for more than 10 years, were becoming thinner under the washing of the Buddha's light, as if they would eventually be eroded into nothingness. Because of the shock, Master Bushu had already stopped playing the Yulan bell between his fingers. The bell in the Lank temple was still ringing, but the crisp sound of the bell gradually disappeared. Ning Kei carried her on his back. Sang Sang lowered her head and leaned on his shoulder. Her face was pale and her body was weak, but she habitually reached out to hold the umbrella for him, just like when he carried her on his back in the cold rain many years ago. Ning Kei did not want her to hold the umbrella, for he knew that she was in a very bad situation. Sang Sang still took the big black umbrella. Amazingly, when the big black umbrella was in her hands, it suddenly became much more stable than before, as if it could withstand more Buddha's light. Ning Kei walked out of the Buddha's light with Sang Sang on his back. He held the padao horizontally in front of his chest and the iron bow and arrow box on his back. He looked at the people in the hall expressionlessly and did not speak. His eyes were cold and fierce, as dangerous as a tigress protecting her cubs. The people in the hall were all powerhouses, but when they looked at his eyes, they subconsciously did not want to make eye contact with him. Then they discovered something amazing, so they calmed down a little. Ning Kei walked out of the Buddha's light, but he could not walk out of it. The Buddha's light that descended from the peak of Hua Mountain seemed to be able to sense his position. More accurately, it could sense the position of Sang Sang, who was holding the big black umbrella, and moved with his footsteps. Ning Kei looked at the fragments of the Buddha's light that fell from the edge of the big black umbrella into the air and then disappeared. He was silent. Ha ha! Lu Qinjia woke up from her shock. Looking at Ning Kei under the umbrella, she could not help but laugh out loud. She laughed so hard that she could not catch her breath. Tears streamed down her face and she looked extremely crazy. The most important person to you has become the daughter of Yama. Ning Kei, what can you do now? You can probably understand what I have been feeling these days. Ning Kei looked at her expressionlessly. There was some pity and extreme contempt in his eyes. The laughter gradually stopped. Lu Qinjia was confused and silent. Her face was pale and the wound was still bleeding. However, she understood the meaning of Ning Kei's look of pity and contempt. She could not help but be confused. So that was what he said and did. But why did he not think about it? That was the daughter of Yama. Mr. 13, please put her down. Master Bushu had a compassionate look on his face as he chanted the name of Buddha and looked at Ning Quebec. Cheng Zicheng sat at the entrance of the hall with his head lowered. His sword was unsheathed and placed across his knees. Ning Kei looked at the little bell between Master Bushu's fingers. He looked at the sword on Cheng Zicheng's knees. Then he looked up at the big black umbrella. Master Bushu was the chief monk of the Shenkong Temple. He was a person of great enlightenment, and his state was equivalent to the knowing destiny state or even higher. The bell in his hand was a relic of Buddha. It carried the purest Buddha nature and was the bane of Sang Sang. Cheng Zicheng was the younger brother of the sage of sword, Lu Bai. He was a powerhouse in the knowing destiny state. Even though he had not shown himself these days, the thin sword on his knees had the power to split a lake and cut a mountain. The big black umbrella was the most powerful in Sang Sang's hands, just like it had been for the past decade. However, under the washing of the supreme light of Buddha, the grease on the surface of the umbrella continued to disappear. One could already feel the merciful coldness of the light of Buddha through the smallest cracks on the surface of the umbrella. Ning Ke did not have the confidence to escape from the two powerhouses of the Shenkong Temple and the Sword Garret even if he did not carry Sang Sang on his back. Furthermore, he was carrying Sang Sang now, so the light of Buddha would follow them and suppress them. Since we have found the daughter of Yama, no one in the world will let her escape. Even if you escape to the deepest part of the wilderness or into the stormy sea, you will still not be able to escape from the light of Buddha. Master Bushu's fingers that were holding the bronze bell tightened slightly. He looked at Ning Ke and said, "Give up." At this moment, Master Chishan said sadly, "Since they can't leave, don't ring the bell." Ning Ke looked at the master in silence. His right hand left the hilt and patted the scabbard that was sticking out from his waist. People thought that his silence represented a fierce psychological struggle, and they all had different expressions. Cheng Zicheng sighed and thought to himself, "Even if they are your birth parents, they are the daughter of Yama. What other choice do you have?" Only Master Chishan vaguely knew what Ning Ke was thinking. Ning Ke looked at Master Chishan and found that although the master looked sad, he was not shocked. He was sure that the master had known that Sang Sang was the daughter of Yama a long time ago. When he was in Chang, and he felt a little uneasy when he thought about going to the Lank Temple. Now that he looked back, he realized that Sang Sang's illness, the 3 games of chess in Hua Mountain, and his cultivation of Buddhism in the temple all pointed to the truth. The Lank Temple was his and Sang Sang's doom. Then he thought of something even further and could not help but feel a chill. It was the headmaster's idea to come to the Lank Temple to treat Sang Sang. Specifically, it was the arrangement that eldest brother had written to Master Chishan. It can't be like this, Ning Ke said to himself silently. He wanted to drive the most unacceptable inference out of his mind. However, he needed the truest answer even if it would be extremely painful. So he looked at the master in silence. Master Chishan knew what he wanted to hear and said, "Do you now believe that she is the daughter of Yama?" Ning Ke said without any emotion, "You used to say that she is the daughter of light, and now you say that she is the daughter of Yama. How do I know which one to believe? I only know that I picked her up and fed her mouthful after mouthful of porridge. If she really is someone's daughter, it can only be my daughter." Master Chishan said with pity, "But this is the truth. A few days ago in the cave you asked me to treat her. When my hand fell on her wrist, I felt the cold aura and knew that was the brand that Yama left on her. Have you never thought that the cold aura that even the headmaster and the West Hill divine skills could not drive away could not be a normal illness caused by a weak childhood cold?" Ning Ke had long suspected the strange cold aura in Sang Sang's body. However, he did not say it or think about it so that he could forget it. Now that the master pointed it out, he said after a moment of silence, "It is still just a guess. There is no way to be sure. Teacher said that there is no omniscient person in the world." "Yes. That is why the headmaster asked you to come to the Lank Temple. The first thing is to determine the illness in her body. Only then can we know the truth and find a way to cure it." Master Chishan sighed and said, "This year's 3 games of chess on the Hua Mountain were actually prepared for Sang Sang. At the Jumping Tiger Stream, no matter how tough you were, I would still find a way for her to solve the game." "What?" Ning Ke asked. "To prove who she is." Master Chishan said, "The way she solved the chaotic Ku game was the method of heaven's calculation. It is not a level that can be achieved by humans. So the first game proved that she is not a human." Ning Ke was silent. Master Chishan continued, "In the autumn pavilion she played the second game with Dong Ming, and her first choice was the black chess piece. Dong Ming was best at observing the celestial phenomena in chess. In the end it was hard to tell who would win or lose, just like light and darkness confronting each other in the sky. It was also a sign of the daughter of Yama's identity." Ning Ke said, "Master Dongming said at that time that the separation of black and white was determined by the mind." Master Chishan looked at Sang Sang on Ning Ke's back and said lovingly, "The will of heaven depends on her mind." There are 4 chapters today. This is the first chapter. The next chapter must be finished before midnight. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 585. Master Dongming had been sitting in the corner of the hall since the beginning. When he heard himself being mentioned, he chanted the name of Buddha and then fell silent. It seemed that he had already known the truth about Sang Sang's origin. Master Chishan's eyes left Sang Sang's face and looked at Ning Quebec. He said, "You participated in the 3rd game. Although you were late, you should know what had happened. Although the rules of the world inside and outside the chessboard are different, they are still within the rules of Haotian. Sang Sang broke the eternal rule above time, death. You should know that in the world of Hao Yin, only Hao Yin himself can make or surpass the eternal rule. If a person who can break the eternal rule is not Hao Yin, then she must not be from this world. She must even come from the underworld of eternal silence and endless pain. The real 3 games of chess on Hua Mountain was one of the many tricks that Buddha prepared before he left this world. It was also the most important trick. It was used to find the trace of the son of Yama, just like the Yulan bell. Junior brother Lotus had also solved the puzzle in the past, but his situation was different from Sang Sang's. Because the method or path he chose was different, Sang Sang's extraordinary calculation power, her mind, and her disregard for the rules revealed the shocking truth step by step. Master Qishan sighed and finally said, "She is the daughter of Yama." Ning Ke said, "Whether it was Buddha in the past, Shenkong Temple, Lank Temple, or White Tower Temple in Yueluan, all these things are said by you monks. But this is the world of Haotian. If Sang Sang is the daughter of Yama, why didn't Taoism find anything and still call her the daughter of light? I can't figure it out, so you still can't convince me." Master Qishan said, "Since the projection was in the world of Haotian, Yama naturally prepared many tricks for his children. Haotian Taoism was the first to bear the brunt, so we Buddhism and the academy didn't see it as clearly." Ning Ke understood the meaning of this sentence, and he even knew Sang Sang's identity. But he still didn't want to admit it because he knew that if he admitted it verbally, it would bring a lot of inconvenience to his actions. "I need more evidence," he said. Master Qishan sighed and said, "That day in front of this hall, I once said that the most interesting thing about you is that you can do what you want. If you don't want to, you can do what you can't think of. This is not Zen but a real Sai. You have lived with Sang Sang since you were young. If you really think about it, how can you not understand?" Ning Ke did not speak. Master Qishan pointed at the big black umbrella in the light of Buddha and said, "This black umbrella can isolate and conduct everything including light. It is not something that should exist in the human world. Many years ago when you got this big black umbrella, didn't you find it strange? Didn't you have any doubts?" The process of Ning Ke picking up the big black umbrella was too ordinary. If Sang Sang had not cried, he would have thrown it away. However, as time went by, the big black umbrella gradually showed many incredible characteristics. This seemingly inconspicuous big black umbrella was impervious to fire and water, and also as pure as Sang Sang. It could conduct and even amplify the psyche power and even Hao Yin's divine flame of the umbrella holder. In the classics and legends of the cultivation world, there had never been such an all-around defensive weapon. It was even more magical than Baoshu's Yulan bell. At the entrance of Northern Mountain Road, during the night when he killed the sword master Yen Suqing, during the battle with Xiaohou at the lake in winter, and even earlier at the Shubi Lake in Min Mountain, he would have died many times without this big black umbrella. At this time, Ning Ke certainly understood that the big black umbrella was a weapon given to Sang Sang by Yama. Then the black umbrella somehow recognized that Ning Ke was Sang Sang's protector and began to protect him. Several years ago in the spring, on the first day he officially became an ordinary student of the academy, he met a scholar. The scholar had a wooden dipper tied to his waist and a scroll in his hand. The scholar wanted to exchange the wooden dipper for the big black umbrella on Ning Ke's back. Ning Ke did not want to exchange the big black umbrella on his back for the wooden dipper on his waist. The scholar did not say anything. He walked to the side door of the academy, boarded an ox cart and left the academy. Later, Ning Ke found out that the scholar was the eldest brother of the academy. At that time, the headmaster of the academy was sitting in the ox cart. That was the last thing the headmaster of the academy did before he traveled around the countries again. It was not until now in the Lank Temple that he truly understood what he had missed when he refused the exchange back then. But it seemed that everything was a little too late. Note: for more details, see Chapter 79 and Chapter 80 of the first volume, The Empire in the Morning. What is the big black umbrella? It is a piece of night. Master Qishan's answer was very mysterious and difficult to understand, but Ning Ke understood. Master Qishan looked at Ning Ke and said, 16 years ago, the 3 heavenly wayfarers of the Buddhism, Taoism and Devil's doctrine gathered in the wilderness. I heard that Mr. First also went there for the sign of the arrival of the son of Yama. It was also on that day that Sang Sang was born in the official of council's mansion. It was also on that day that Ning Ke escaped into the woodshed of the official of council's mansion and held the hatchet. However, at that time he did not know what the newborn girl meant to him. Ning Ke thought of today in the Lank Temple. He had told Cheng Lishue and Cuni Madi twice that the great divine priest of light could also make mistakes. Only then did he realize that everything was really just a mistake, when the current wife of the Grand Secretary, the concubine of the official of Council's mansion, was pregnant with Sang Sang. The formidable great divine priest of light saw the shadow of the night earlier than anyone else in the world. So his eyes fell on Chang'an City and fell on an alley. The great divine priest of light did not see Sang Sang because Sang Sang could not be seen at that time. He saw a little boy in the general's mansion. He saw a person who was born with knowledge. So he thought he saw the son of Yama. Sang Sang leaned on Ning Kei's shoulder and listened to the conversation. Her face became paler and paler because she remembered and understood many things. She remembered that day an old man in a dirty cotton-padded jacket walked into the old brush pen shop. The old man said to her, "Do you believe in lucky chances?" She also remembered that before the old man died, he looked back at her sitting under the tree. He seemed very hesitant and struggled. It was not until the end that he understood. He smiled and said, "So you are my lucky chance. She is the daughter of Yama. She is waking up and the eyes of Yama are about to fall on her. So you will think that she will die because you and she are people from two different worlds. The 3 games of chess on Wa Mountain are for her to play, but also for you to see. The first game requires the white chess piece to give up. The second game is to let you understand the opposition between light and shadow. The third game is to let you see the scene of the world's destruction. All of these are to let you learn to give up. Unfortunately, the first 2 games are meaningless to you. In the third game, the world that is about to be destroyed cannot change your mind. Then what about the real world?" Master Qishan looked into Ning Kei's eyes and sighed. "If the world we live in is about to be destroyed because of the little girl on your back, what will you choose?" Note: for more details see Chapter 103 of Volume 2 New Urn Old Urn Ashes as Snow. Well, my behavior is really asking for a beating. But I am really afraid that some readers have forgotten that the contents of these chapters and the previous plots are really good to read. Well, why don't you read Jaya again? The next chapter is before 2 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 586. Ning Kei had always known that Sang Sang was special. But he also knew that he was special. He came from another world and was undoubtedly special in this world. That was why he had always thought that Sang Sang's uniqueness came from his uniqueness, because she was his natal. But he had never thought that Sang Sang was the special one. When did eldest senior brother find out about this? Was it a long time ago? Ning Kei looked at Master Qishan and asked. He had already guessed the answer, but he wanted to confirm it again because this matter was very important to him, second only to the danger of Sang Sang's identity. Master Qishan said, "I'm not sure, but Mr. First had made it very clear in his letter. The headmaster asked you to come to Lank Temple to see if the Buddhism sect had a way to remove the cold aura in her body. It was because the academy knew that the Buddhism sect had a way to deal with the imprint of Yama." So the headmaster already knew about it. Ning Kei said in a self-deprecating manner. Until now, there were many things that he could not figure out. When they returned from the wilderness, eldest brother, contrary to his usual gentle and kind temperament, insisted on opposing Ning Kei and Sang Sang's relationship. Perhaps he had vaguely guessed Sang Sang's true identity. But the headmaster agreed to marry Sang Sang. After saying this, he suddenly understood something. Therefore, the emotion that he treasured the most and the most precious returned to his body. That emotion was called trust. So he raised his head and his eyes became unusually bright and sharp. He looked at the people in the temple and began to slowly pat the scabbard rhythmically, full of confidence that came from nowhere. The scabbard of the padao was very hard and thick. When he patted it, the sound was very dull and could not be very loud. Even though the temple was very quiet, it was difficult to attract attention. But there were always people in this world, or horses with especially good hearing. The big black horse, who had been chewing on grass and spitting on plums in the garden behind Lank Temple, became alert after the bell rang and the light of Buddha descended. It kept staring in the direction of the temple. It had already heard Ning Kei when he first patted the scabbard. That was the agreement between it and Ning Quebec. However, it could feel the power contained in the light of Buddha and knew that there were many powerful humans in the temple, so it hesitated for a long time. The sound of Ning Kei patting the scabbard for the second time could be heard. The big black horse grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. It made up its mind, lowered its head and left the hall without a sound, running towards the Zen temple. The big black horse ran into the Zen temple and came to the side of the black horse carriage. It lowered its body skillfully and put its head into the carriage. Then it opened its mouth and bit the leather rope tightly. With a sudden kick of its hind hooves, it leaped forward. The big black horse had used twice the strength he usually used to pull the carriage. He thought that the carriage would gallop along with him, but the carriage did not move at all. Only then did it realize that without Ning Ke, the talisman array on the carriage could not be activated at all. This carriage made of stainless steel must be extremely heavy. Fortunately, or perhaps unfortunately, the big black horse had many experiences in pulling the carriage when the talisman array was not activated when it was in Chang'an. It breathed heavily helplessly, its muscles bulging and its hooves trembling. It dragged the heavy black carriage out of the Zen temple and towards the Buddha hall. The stainless steel wheels left marks on the blue stone on the ground behind the Lank temple. Fortunately, it did not make too much noise. As the big black horse pulled the carriage with all its strength, it thought with some fear that it was not the right time to go to the Buddha hall. It did not know that the inconspicuous mistress had such a powerful background. If it was killed with that idiot Ning Ke, would there be any benefits when it reached the underworld? Master Bushu looked at Ning Ke and said, "As long as you are willing to leave the daughter of Yama and let the Shenkong temple handle it, you can leave on your own. The academy will receive the most sincere gratitude and respect from the Buddhism sect." Ning Ke did not answer his request. After a moment of silence, Master Bushu said, "Although Daosher is my son, if you are willing to think of the people in the world, then I can ignore this feud." Upon hearing this, Kuni Mati's body trembled slightly. She looked at Bushu with hatred but did not dare to speak. At the door of the hall, Cheng Zicheng looked at Ning Ke and said, "Mr. 13, no one dares to disrespect the academy. But since it has been confirmed that she is the daughter of Yama, then the Sword Garret or any other cultivation sect will not allow you to take her away. Please understand this." Other than asking Master Chishan, Ning Ke remained silent the rest of the time. The people in the hall thought that he still could not accept the fact that Sang Sang was the daughter of Yama, so they were waiting for him to wake up. Looking at his expression, they guessed that he was already sure and must be struggling in his heart. They sympathized with him and hoped for a peaceful solution, so they began to persuade him. To them, no matter what choice Ning Ke would make, it would be a long and painful process. However, the development of things was completely different from what they had imagined. "You see, I have said many times on the journey that you will not die." Ning Ke turned to look at Sang Sang's little face and said, "If you are the daughter of Yama, how can you die? If you die, you will just go home." There is no need to say so many last words. Now that I think of the scene, it is really funny. It is good that you are confirmed that the cold aura will not kill you. He did not know before because he did not want to know. Now that he knew that his little handmaiden, who was now his wife, could destroy the whole world, he just knew it. I said that Buddha will not tolerate you. Buddha will not allow the daughter of Yama to live in this world. How long do you think you can last under the light of Buddha? Kuni Mati looked at him and shouted, "Ning Ke, don't think that I don't know that you are stalling for time and waiting for the academy to save you. No matter how arrogant the academy is, do you dare to protect the daughter of Yama? Just give up and think about why the academy wants you to come to the Lank temple for treatment. What does this have to do with the academy?" Ning Ke held the hilt of the padao again and said, "When I was young, I was not a student of the academy, but I still carried her over so many mountains and killed so many people and beasts who wanted to kill us. Now she has grown up and I have become so strong. Am I not as strong as I used to be?" Hearing these words, everyone's heart instantly became alarmed, and a chill gradually arose in their hearts. In the Buddhist hall at the back of the temple, there was a person who had been silent. Today the situation had changed so many times that no one noticed her silence. However, at this moment she looked up at Ning Quebec and Mo Shanshan did not say a word today, but the expression on her face changed several times. At the beginning, when Ning Ke defeated Kuni Mati and the flower addict, and was evenly matched with Master Bushu, she smiled happily. When Sang Sang's identity was revealed, she was shocked and confused. She did not know what to do. Ning Ke did not look at her, but he knew that she was looking at him. So he shook his head firmly and unquestionably. He knew that Mo Shanshan definitely knew what he meant. 2 years ago they had fought side by side in the wilderness and had developed enough tacit understanding. However, he did not want her to choose a side, even if it was beneficial to him. The underworld invasion was too big, so big that even the academy could not bear it. Moreover, she was just a calligraphy addict who had just entered the knowing destiny state. Ning Ke hoped that she could have the freedom not to choose. "For the sake of the world, for the sake of the continued existence of the world, I humbly beg you to hand the daughter of Yama to the Shenkong temple. Other than this, I can agree to any other request of yours." Master Bushu looked at Ning Ke and said, Ning Ke looked at him coldly and said, "If I want you to die, will you do it?" Master Bushu said calmly, "If I can save the world, of course I will." Ning Ke did not know what to say to this answer. Madi looked at Ning Ke's expression and knew that the more the people in the hall were willing to pay, the more pain he would suffer. She said in a hoarse voice, "If you are willing to hand over the daughter of Yama, I am also willing to die." Ning Ke said calmly, "Your life is worthless." Madi was furious. Then Ning Ke looked at Master Bushu and said, "If it is for the sake of the world, what does it have to do with me? I am not a Buddhist cultivator. If it is for the sake of righteousness, what does righteousness have to do with me? I am not a Taoist priest, I am just an ordinary student in the academy. All I want to do is to take my wife away." Master Bushu said, "But no one can resist the rules of Haotian. Being unable to resist does not mean that we do not want to resist. In fact, in this world full of rules, you and everyone else are resisting the rules all the time." Ning Ke looked at the crowd and said, "When we are sick, we will take medicine to resist illness. We will eat ginseng to maintain our health and resist aging. We will cultivate to resist death. Some will commit suicide to resist life. You are the president of the commandment yard, but you have an illegitimate son. The preaching monk also has an illegitimate son named Wudao. I heard that Master Chishan is the illegitimate son of the previous chief preaching monk. I do not want to say that you are all thieves, prostitutes, monks and nuns, but in fact, you are all resisting the Buddha's commandments or moral restraints." Master Bushu and Madi's expressions turned especially ugly. Master Chishan, however, shook his head and laughed, as if he liked hearing someone belittle the Shenkong temple to such an extent. "Of course you want to kill Sang Sang. That is also a form of resistance." Ning Ke looked at Sang Sang and said, "But I do not want her to die. Then you must allow me to resist your resistance." "Do you really want to protect the daughter of Yama?" Master Bushu's expression turned grave and solemn. He said, "But you must know that she cannot survive in this world. The academy did not ask you to bring her to Lank to cure her." Ning Ke shook his head and said, "Teacher and eldest brother asked us to cure her." Master Bushu said sternly, "If she dies, the illness will naturally disappear." Ning Ke said, "If it was someone else, I might really suspect that he asked me to bring Sang Sang to Lank to cure her illness in order to cooperate with your Buddha's conspiracy. But I believe in eldest brother." Madi could not understand his confidence at this moment. She asked angrily why. Ning Ke said, "Because he is eldest brother." Corrected an important typo. Chapter 4 is still before 4 o'clock. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian.com to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.